Good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we have a full house today. I like it. Welcome to the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor. Madam Secretary, will you please take roll?
Perfect.
Assemblywoman Backus. Assemblyman Carter.
Present.
Assemblywoman Duran. Assemblywoman Hardy. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Close the door.
Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblywoman Torres. Assemblyman Yeager. Assemblyman Urick. Chair Marzola.
I am here. Welcome, everyone that is here in Carson City with us today, everyone that is in Las Vegas, and anyone appearing over the internet. Today we will hear 4 bills: Assembly Bill 213, Assembly Bill 218, Assembly Bill 298, and Assembly Bill 327. I will be taking those out of order. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping announcements. Please turn off all of your electronic devices, especially your cell phones. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide your business card if you do have one. If you have handouts for the committee, please provide 20 copies to the committee secretary prior to your testimony. For those testifying online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize any background noise. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state and spell your name for the record. I expect courtesy and respect in all our interactions, even if we may not agree. With that, we will move to our first agenda item. I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 218, which revises provisions governing landlords and tenants. Assemblywoman Cassadine, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. My name is Venetia Considine. I have the honor of representing Assembly District 18 in Southeast Las Vegas and Henderson. Today, I am here to present on Assembly Bill 218. The goal of this bill is to bring transparency and certainty to individuals and families seeking a place to rent. There is an amendment uploaded on Nellis, and you should have it. The idea for this bill actually started after I was first elected prior to the last session, as most of us from Southern Nevada have done in 2020, 2021, and now this time is we are seeking a place to rent while we were up here. One of the things that I learned, not being a renter otherwise, is that when my roommates and I found a place to live and determined that the rent was affordable and we were ready to sign the lease, we then found out that the rent amount that we were told was not the full amount. There was additional charges for valet trash, for sewer and water. Some places, after talking to folks, they have additional fees for entertainment packages and for all of these other items that are not optional. The main goal of this bill is to provide transparency for folks who are looking for a place to live, and they are balancing their checkbook, and they are making every penny count, and they need to know what their rent will be at the end or the beginning of every month. And one of the things that I've learned now twice finding places to rent up here is that right now there is a movement to add additional what I call resort-style fees to your rent. What I would like this bill to do is when you ask somebody what the rent is, that rent includes a single amount that includes every non-optional fee that you're paying every month. So to be clear, if there is an option for a pet fee, that is an option. If there is available parking or garages that are optional, those are optional. What I am focusing on are the things that are not optional. Further, the way that this bill is drafted is a little confusing, so I want to talk about the 5 main things that this bill does, and then go over the amendments and bridge any confusion on this bill. This bill requires that any time the rental cost is listed, the amount must include all non-optional fees. So if the rent is $1,200 and it's $40 for sewer and water and another $25 for trash, then your rent should include both that $25 for trash and that $40 for sewer and water every time you see the amount of the rent. And the reason is that this resort style of price listing can be detrimental to a person trying to plan their monthly budget when they're seeking a place to live. And they need to know that from the get-go, from the first time that they're seeing how much it is in an advertisement, on a piece of paper, on a website, wherever. This change will provide transparency and certainty for someone living paycheck to paycheck, which is a large segment of the population of Nevada. Second, this bill allows a prospective tenant to review a boilerplate lease so they know what the lease requires, including any additional costs or requirements that they otherwise might not know about if they can't review just a boilerplate lease before they sit down and sign the lease. Everyone should have a complete information before making a decision to put down any non-refundable fees. There are no requirements about how this lease is presenting. It could be on the website, it could be emailed, it could be a document that they look at in person. This bill does not determine that. Third, this bill also requires landlords to provide a free way to pay rent. I don't think that you should have to pay a fee to pay your rent if you can't afford it or don't want to do it. So in this bill, it requires that landlords provide a free way to pay rent that does not require providing a personal banking information. For example, old school, you pay by check, you pay by money order. I had a landlord tell me as we were talking about this bill that they accept cash. However that works, that's fine. But there should be an option to pay the amount of the rent that you owe without having to pay that rent. So this would mean that a tenant could pay their rent for free and without having to use a portal to make a payment. Because portals do ask, or at least in my personal experience and the experiences of the people that I've spoken to, those portals and websites want your personal banking information. This is separate from that. Also, there is a piece, well, I'll get into that after I do this, because this is where it gets confusing. So what am I on? 1, 2, 3, 4. So fourth, if a landlord requires a tenant to use a portal or an internet website for maintenance, for reviewing their documents, to exchange communications, to make requests for maintenance, whatever those issues are, including providing options to pay the rent in any way they choose to pay the rent, the tenant chooses to pay the rent, they must list the cost and fees to pay the rent through the portal or the website. In other words, if you are required to use a portal or a website to pay your rent, it should be very clear, and most are, that if you are using a debit card, there is a fee for the debit card and what that fee is. If you are paying by credit card, this is what the fee for the credit card is. So you know ahead of time what you're paying. Further, the cost of those fees to pay the rent through the portal or website cannot exceed the actual cost to the portal or the website. In other words, if you're a landlord and you have contracted with a portal or a website to be sort of the servicer between you and the tenant, the cost of making those payments
$40 a month for sewer and water. And what we have done, and I think many people have done, is you kind of round out what that is per month. But if, according to this, then what we would have to do, we need to be able to charge for the water or other services. And sometimes we have a furnished unit where the landlord keeps the cable in their name for TV service, and that is remaining in their name, and then they bill the tenant. And so I think we have to be able to have the option to charge for these additional services. And some of them are fluctuating amounts. Cable, I don't know, you rent movies, or water amount changes between summer and winter, and those are fluctuating amounts. So to force us to round that up into, if it's $1,500 and we do $40, and now we have to track each bill, that's another kind of accounting nightmare, and then we have to add that to the $1,500. That's a fluctuating amount. And so to not be able to charge for that, and like you said, it must be one amount, how would you propose that we handle those issues?
Venetia Constantine for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama, from the chair through the chair to Assemblywoman Kasama.
You can go direct.
Thank you. I'm going to start a little bit backwards. So your example about the cable and the owner's name, that's going to be the same amount. So I'm not saying that you don't have a piece of paper that breaks down what all of these fees are and where they should go, but the tenant needs to know what they're paying every month. So that cable amount should be the same amount all the way through. And you mentioned the $40 a month for sewer and water. If that is sewer and trash, if that is what you're rounding out normally, then that is the amount that you would put in that lease for however long that lease is. Now, if they're, and happy to talk about this more, but that is a non-optional charge. So if that is a fluctuating amount and you have determined that $40 a month is usually sufficient for this, there might be conversations that we have separately about, well, then maybe there should be an addendum, which most leases have addendums now, saying if the water bill goes excessively beyond this, then every 6 months or at the term of the lease, however, we can balance it. My goal here is to not be the one to figure that out. My goal here is for a tenant to know exactly how much they need to pay so that they can plan accordingly.
Correct. So you would understand we might need flexibility with that, because otherwise we might round up to, in my example, $1,500 a month, we might round up to $2,000 a month to cover it because we don't know what it might be or how much water they use, for example. So, but obviously the tenant, we want the tenant to know your rent is $1,500 and you're going to be responsible for water, sewer, cable, whatever it might be, and you'll have to pay that amount each month. And so I think we'd have to, which we do. I do that. My tenants, when they have a full outline of everything that they have to pay. And so we just want to make sure that we can cover those type costs. Chair, could I have one other question? Go ahead. Yeah. So there's a section here where you said in section 3 that may bring a civil action in any court for violations of this. I've just noticed a trend in the legislature where we're trying to get away from immediate lawsuits, and we're trying to have hearings and be able to sit people down to work things out. And I'm wondering why you're going directly to a lawsuit versus saying that there should be a mediation, or that people have an opportunity to work together on this and work out any differences they might have. This seems very aggressive to go directly to a lawsuit.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Venetia Constein, for the record. In my experience, in my life as an attorney, I've seen many bills and laws that have great intentions, but when when the bill is put into the law, there's no trigger, there is no way to enforce that by a private person when something happens. So I have found that the deceptive trade practice does provide a civil remedy for folks that is going to be something that's in justice court, small claims court. It is not a massive case. It doesn't have to be a certain number so that it rises to the level of the AG's office or someone else taking it on, but is a way to solve smaller problems between problem entities, which are not the majority in any case, but those problem entities and the people being harmed. So that's the intent to do this piece.
I would just rather see that we go towards mediation, which we are in many other areas with these issues, but thank you for your response.
If I may just respond to that, it's my understanding, Venetia Constein for the record, that if there is a suit done in justice court or small claims, the first option is usually, would you like to go to mediation? And that is done in the courthouse.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Assemblywoman, for the bill. I had a question on one of the sections of the amendment. It's the first proposed amendment, adding a section for a free way to pay outside of the website. So just wanted to get this on the record. If a landlord decided they would allow someone to pay by check or money order or cash, would this amendment preclude them from charging a fee for that? Or if they were allowed to charge a fee, would that have to be somehow included in the rent? So I'm just trying to get what the intent is. I think I know, but just so the record's clear.
Venetia Constein for the record. Thank you, Speaker Yeager. Yes, the intent is for someone to be able to pay what I would say like their rent in the old school way, and there not be any additional fees on it, so that you're just paying your rent. It is not, paying the rent itself does not become a profit motive. So does that answer your question?
Could I have a quick follow-up, please? And I guess, obviously they'll draft this. I know this is not the actual amendment. It'll be drafted, but I just wondered for your intent, is it, would a landlord have to allow, I guess I see it 3 different ways: check, money order, cash. Maybe there's something else, barter. I'm not sure, but would the landlord just have to offer one of those, a way to pay, for free, or would you envision that they would be obligated to sort of accept like all of these, not the barter part, but the check, the cash, the money order?
Venetia Constantine for the record. Thank you for the question. I hesitated about putting anything in there because I know in my own district, there is one community that does accept cash for payments, and a lot of older folks, they know when they get their Social Security, and then they go and get cash, and then they get robbed outside of 7-Eleven because it's a known entity. So I hesitate to put, you have to accept cash, you have to do this. I would assuming at least 2 of those 3 would be an option for any landlord.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I kind of had a follow-up and maybe another remedy with respect to the private right of action is when I'm looking at Section 2 and the mandates, and I do like and I commend your effort to addressing affordable housing and the transparency of what one may be paying for rent, was what about, because maybe making the contract like voidable, so each party could go their own way, because if not, and the tenant is forced to stay there and paying these higher rents, that just goes to obviously their damages against the landlord, and maybe this could be an easy way for both to go their own ways. I was just kind of thinking that out loud. I don't know if you thought about that, or maybe the intent is in the statute that it is void. I wasn't sure.
Venetia Constantine for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Backus. The goal here is to be completely upfront, so that someone is not required to put down non-refundable fees. So the goal is to stop this before they sign a lease, so that they're aware of this is what the rent is supposed to be, also in conjunction with the prospective tenant's ability to see what the lease is. So I didn't actually get to the point where the rent would be voidable. This is all supposed to be upfront because what I want to avoid is somebody paying a non-refundable application fee, any other non-refundable fees before they even get to the lease. Now, if that lease is voidable, when can they get the security deposit back? Now you have someone who's living month to month that now might not have the amount of funding that they need to go find another place to live. So the goal was to stop it at the advertising stage, or when you go to the apartment complex or the property manager and you ask how much it is, and then you're looking at a lease or anything, and then it's saying that it's significantly more, that you catch all of that before you get in the situation where you can't afford the rent because of those extra fees.
I guess my concern was I was following my colleague asking him questions about like the water expense, like where everything's broken out and the person looks at the lease, looks good, they sign it. And let's use your example of like those unknown portal fees, they're not disclosed. So the tenant goes ahead and enters the contract, and then surprise, surprise, there's all these fees that are prohibited by statute. That's where I was at in my line of questioning, is where the tenant is left at that point after they've already signed the lease.
Thank you, Venetia Constantine, for the record. I appreciate the clarification, and I am happy to add something along those lines, that if they do sign the lease and this information is incorrect, that it is potentially voidable under certain circumstances.
I don't see any additional questions. We will move to testimony in support of Assembly Bill 218. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 218? So I want to remind everyone to state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Jonathan Norman, Norman, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. Having transparency for consumers is always something we're going to support, and having the ability to, as an attorney, I always want to see teeth in a bill, and the ability for consumers to seek redress. And I think where those can be mediated in the court process, I think that's great, but I think consumers should have that option. And I also, one of the smaller legal aid providers I represent is a senior law program. And to be a client there, you have to be over the age of 60. And they struggle a lot with people coming in who have the fees for paying through an online portal where that's the only way they can pay their rent. For seniors to navigate that, I think it's been really challenging, and they're always getting caught up. So we're in support of the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sarah Adler, today representing NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are in support of AB 218 for a few reasons. Of course, what we refer to as NAMI families, our loved ones are primarily on disability, so they have very limited income. So this full disclosure and transparency is critically important for families who are trying to find housing for their loved ones. Also, we have many times the situation where our loved one has a guardianship, and so we're using a payee system already to manage their funds, and so an additional fee on top of paying the rent is challenging and harmful for the family budget. And then this is not only NAMI families, but of course we have hundreds of thousands of low-income Nevadans who are in the same situation and needing to squeeze every penny. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders, and I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 218. At Plan, we have heard countless stories of predatory fees that catch tenants off guard, but one of the most egregious stories I experienced firsthand alongside a friend. While running errands, she informed me that we needed to stop to pick up a money order to pay her rent. When I asked why she wasn't paying online, she informed me that there was a 5% surcharge of her rent that she was not initially aware of, which could amount to hundreds of dollars for her each month. AB 218 will materially improve the lives of renters in Nevada by ending hidden and excessive fees so that tenants can know exactly what they are being charged for each month. We urge your support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lilith Barron, LilithBaran. I'm with the ACLU of Nevada. I won't belabor the points of my colleagues, but we are in full support of this bill. Any effort towards transparency when it comes to these matters is very important. And as a renter myself, I have firsthand experience with these fees, and it is very oftentimes the difference between paying a full utility bill or other bill in the full amount and paying these fees. So please take that into consideration when you are making your decision. Thank you.
Paul Catha, Culinary Workers Union Local 226. Last name is spelled C-A-T-H-A. We support the bill. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here in Carson City wanting to testify in support of Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support to Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the lines?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in support.
I'll come back. You can go ahead, Broadcast.
Thank you.
If you'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 218, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 663, you are not unmuted and may begin.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Shane Piccinini, S-H-A-N-E-P-I-C-C-I-N-I-N-I, with the Food Bank of Northern Nevada, and we are in support of Assembly Bill 218. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Will Pregman. That's P as in Peter, R-E-G-M-A-N, Communications Director with Battle Born Progress. We are calling in to support this bill to thank Assemblywoman Considine for bringing it forward. We agree that there should be full transparency on all fees and no added charges for no other reason than making a profit. This would go forward to make sure that there is an even playing field for landlords and tenants alike to navigate this process and ensure that rental agreements are clear and transparent. Thank you very much.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. We will go back to Las Vegas. If you're wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 218, you may start when you're ready.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Marzola and committee members. My name is Laura Tooker, Lauratooker, and I'm a member of Green Valley United Methodist Church, which is a proud member of Nevadans for the Common Good. On behalf of Nevadans for the Common Good, a broad-based organization of 30-plus dues-paying congregations and nonprofits throughout Southern Nevada, representing over 100,000 people, we support AB 218. Our organization is uniquely positioned to hear the challenges and burdens that our tenants face in Southern Nevada. Through our member institutions, we have talked to thousands of Southern Nevada residents, walked through dozens of neighborhoods, and met with many community leaders. We have heard about the high costs and increasing barriers to obtaining affordable and fair lease agreements from across a diversity of residents. Through our experiences, we have heard many stories about the additional charges being added as fees to applications and monthly rent. These fees have become so burdensome that it makes residents question their ability to survive in the Las Vegas Valley. We heard from a renter who had an added fee of $25 just because of the way they were going to be paying the rent. These types of additional fees make our already high rents even more difficult to pay monthly. Our organization is supportive of AB 218 and the proposal to limit any charges related to paying rent online. For nearly 50% of the community, which are renters, they should be able to pay the rent in their lease without new or additional charges, depending on the method of payment. Nevadans for the Common Good encourages you to support AB 218, which reduces the cost of living for nearly half of our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone. We will move to opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone? Well, if you're wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 218, please begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record as well.
Thank you to the Assembly. My name is Louis, L-O-U-I-S, Pombo, Papa Oscar, Mike Bravo, Oscar. I am here representing my office. I'm a real estate broker with Las Vegas Turnkey Rentals. Within AB 218, Section 2, merchant processing fees are variable and not always known in advance. For example, to accept a credit card payment for rent, the card processor, depending on variables such as if the card is a Visa, MasterCard, or Amex, can range from as low as about 1.5% up to 4%. These rates are not known in advance. There is variability within even just accepting a Visa, for example. And so as a landlord, if you were to accept any type of credit card payments, it is quite impossible for us to fix a fee to even know, presuming that we are behaving morally and not aiming to extract additional monies from the tenant. As such, it is impossible for the lessor to follow the requirements set forth in Section 2 and still accept a credit card. Section 6 also requires a flat amount for rent. I appreciate the intent of this, but rent can be variable on, for example, if the tenant elects to pay the landlord to contract and maintain landscaping, and that the agreement may be changed at a later date by way of a tenant electing to contract their own landscaper. There's often a negotiation that takes place at the time of lease signing where the tenant may or may not have additional monetary obligations under the rental agreement. This can cause undue burden on the tenant and force higher payments upon the tenant throughout the course of their lease and does not provide for any type of release through addendums. At a minimum, an amendment should be added relating to such negotiable or ongoing variable costs that may be associated with the rental agreement. We handle furnished rentals, for example, for families that have had a fire or flood. We include basic expanded cable services and properties, and the tenant may be able to utilize the internet and go over on data usage, which may be a variable cost up to $100 extra. Variable usage characteristics such as cable, water, electric, and a high-rise even, which is forced into a landlord's name, should be exempted from this bill at a very minimum. It would be ludicrous for this legislature to introduce
Sir?
a bill to control the water district.
Sir, if you can please wrap up your testimony, your 2 minutes is up.
Thank you for your time.
You may begin when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Christian Salmon, last name spelled Salmon. I'm speaking in opposition to AB 218. As a landlord, these would basically handcuff our hands in a number of ways. Like what the other gentleman said, things come up and things change during the course of a contract that, would affect, this law would affect. And so I'm just asking for the free market to reign here. We all made a decision to come here or to become an elected official, and we have the ability to freely do that. If someone does not want to stay in my residence or residences, then they have the choice to do that. That is their free will. And they can leave and they can go somewhere else. But I do a good job and I don't have turnover. And so there is a consequence to doing practices that are not ethical or moral. And really, we don't need to even go here. So there's just a lot to that. And I just thank you guys for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition? You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Demetria Kalfas Gordon, Demetria. Last name is Kalfas-Gordon, Gordon. I am the broker owner of Hive Real Estate Group in Las Vegas. And we manage a whole bunch of properties, and I'm in opposition to this bill for a number of things. As previous people said, utilities are something that we cannot regulate. Water, sewer, and trash is something we do not put in the tenant's name because they are lienable and they do fluctuate. So we can do like a $45 charge for trash and sewer, because that pretty much covers it, but water is different during different terms of the year, depending on landscaping and individual water usages. Not only that, but we also do furnished short-term rentals, and so we allow for a certain amount of utilities that is included in their contract, and anything over that is extra that they have to pay for. All of those items are disclosed prior to any leases being put in place, so the tenants are fully aware before they move in and sign anything that that information is there, and that's the way it should be. Also, the assemblywoman suggested that we put a boilerplate lease on our website, and that would cover all these fees. Unfortunately, you have condos, single families, multifamilies, et cetera, and they all have their individual rates. So for us to put a boilerplate lease on there is not going to be exemplary of the fees that are being charged. But every applicant that calls in ahead of time is given all of that information either over the phone or in person so that they know before they even submit an application what those fees are. And it should be left for people to be able to do that. To have to sit there and put in fees. What about repair fees that possibly may be charged back to tenants? How do you estimate that a year in advance for something, for some damage? Or glass breakage that is typically in our contract that tenants are responsible for? What if they break, the prices are dependent on sizes?
Ma'am, can you please wrap up your statement?
Yes. There's a lot of fees that are just not able to be disclosed up front, but we can generally go over all of these fees with our tenants. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Sir, you may begin when you're ready.
Yeah, my name is Mark Lister, Lister. I'm with Nevada Superior Properties, been a residential property manager for 23 years. What I want to talk about is the good old days of collecting rent by check and money order and cash. They really weren't the good old days because a lot of people would forget. They leave checks in the wrong place, they get picked up, and we would be in the wrong hands. And we'd be, as a property manager, be in a bad position of having to, hit them with a late charge, put notices out, and go through that process. With the online portal, it's been a godsend because our rent collection rate is 98 to 99% on-time payments, which means they don't have to pay late charges, they don't have eviction notices. The only problem that I see that we have with it is, at least with the system we use, is if they choose to use a credit card, then there's a charge for doing that. But if they use an e-check, then there's no charge, at least with our system. And we've done an addendum, late policies, including best way to pay rent was e-payments to counter that problem and make sure that they're not paying extra fees, or at least that they know there's an extra fee in case they choose to use that method. And they do have the option of using a credit card so they're not late. And so in the long run, they do save money by using this system. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 218? You may begin when you're ready.
My name is Kyle Brennan. Brennan, I represent about 1,500 properties, and some are apartments, some are houses, some are condos. Same thing. I reiterate, there's so many variable costs that you cannot put up front necessarily. Damage, trash bills are changing constantly. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that, but the water, I get water turned on in our name in North Las Vegas, and now I owe $1,000 in order to put it in the next tenant's name. It's insane. So, these things, this bill is, we're in total opposition. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone. We will move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to provide testimony in a neutral position to Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in a neutral position to Assembly Bill 218? I don't see anyone coming to the table. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
If you'd like to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 218, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Assemblywoman, would you like to give some final remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for hearing this bill. I want to reiterate a couple of things. The non-optional fees are the ones that are non-optional. So I know that we've had some mentions of damages or other things. That's not what this covers. These are the things that are monthly, every month. I'm happy to work with folks. I understand that maybe there's an issue with water. Happy to work on those. But for the other things, when you sign a contract, and you are living month to month and you are paying rent, you need to know what you're paying every month. And this is a balancing of tenants need to know what they're paying and the landlord's needs. So I am happy to continue talking with stakeholders on this. I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 218. I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 327, which revises provisions governing real property. Assemblywoman Cassidy, you may begin when you're ready.
Hello, thank you, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. I'm still Venetia Constantine, and I am lucky to be representing Assembly District 18 in Southeast Las Vegas and Henderson, and I'm here to present AB 327. So the intent of this bill is to cover an area that doesn't have, well, let me just explain it, it's much easier. So right now, you, if you're a corporate landlord, you have property managers. If you are a property manager with a real estate license, you have to go through classes, you put yourself under the jurisdiction of the Nevada Real Estate Division, and any discipline is attached to your real estate license. However, if you are a landlord of, say, 5 or more properties and you are personally managing those properties, you cannot go get a property manager permit, because the only way that you can get a property manager permit is to be a real estate licensee. The intent of this bill is to create a permit system for those folks who are managing 5 or more properties of their own properties, are not real estate licensees, but don't have the ability to get the education, to get the permit, to be able to lawfully and completely do the best property management that they can. So what this bill does is it creates a permit process for what right now we're calling landlord property managers. So this is a different permit process than it would be for real estate licensees getting a property manager permit. It's for landlords that have 5 or more properties who are managing their own properties. This is their way to get their permit, be bonded, get the education, and also if any tenants have any issues, they can go to the Nevada Real Estate Division for redress, which they can't do right now because if somebody doesn't have a permit or a license, the Nevada Real Estate Division has no jurisdiction. So tenants in those situations don't really have anywhere to go. Currently, property manager permit, again, can only be obtained by a real estate agent licensee. This has led to the unintended consequences of having landlords who are not real estate licensees but are managing their own properties without the ability to obtain a permit or get the education that the permit provides. Creating this landlord property manager permit bridges that divide. The bill provides for landlord property managers to obtain the permit and be bonded. The permit will have requirements for education, training, and discipline, which are different from the existing property manager permit. This may result in less education hours, different tests. That will all be decided by the commission. There is an amendment to this bill that includes adding that the commission will draft regulations including education, testing, and discipline. The intent would be, again, to adopt regulations allowing this process so that tenants have certainty that their property managers know the law, that landlord property managers understand the law, and that if there is any issues, there is redress. The bill itself lists at this moment 4 or more properties, but to go in to get in line with many other property requirements across the state and federally, I've changed it to 5 and more from 4 and more properties. That's the whole bill. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Committee members, does anyone have any questions? Assemblywoman Kasama.
Surprise. Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation and you're working on this. I do have a couple of concerns. Wanting to have permits for private owners. I don't know how far this would go. So if we have an owner that does handyman work on his own property, or he does the landscaping for the properties that he owns, is he going to have to get a license for that now if he does some of his own? You know, there's just various things that he might be hands-on in doing the property. Are we going to require that owner now who wants to maintain his own properties to go and get permits in other areas as well? So I just have trouble with where this might be going. And because right now, there's nothing in our current statutes that absolves somebody, whether they're trained to be a property manager or not, but if they're managing their own property, they are still required to abide by the laws, by fair housing laws and all the other regulations that are currently out there. There's nothing exempting somebody just because you're an owner to not follow the current law. So they do have to invest in that knowledge and know what it is. And it's good business practice for them to know it so they don't get in trouble. And so I'm just concerned with the onerous regulation that I see that this could add to, because we're talking about affordable housing. We need more housing units out there. We need to make more of it accessible. And I feel like this might lead to people not wanting to own property, or they don't want to invest property or build property to manage and rent out. And then I feel like we could be constricting the housing units. And so I just have concern with that. And I don't think it's needed because people are already under requirements to follow the law.
Venetia Constein for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman, for the questions. So if I miss one, please let me know. I'm sure there are a lot of property managers that want to be educated. Let me rephrase that. I'm sure that there are a lot of owners of multiple dwellings that want to be the best manager of their properties that they can be. They can always hire a property manager that is a real estate licensee if they choose to, but if they are choosing to manage their own properties, I believe that there is a balancing between the landlord having a business of 5 or more properties and the tenant knowing that that landlord property manager has the knowledge of what they are required to do and required for habitability and all of those issues that are included in that. And I think this meets that test. I don't want to talk to, I don't think I'm educated enough or prepared to talk about how the free market works when rules change. I think that happens when any law changes. There are balances between the free market and whether or not somebody wants to be doing this anymore, or if it's more beneficial for them to hire a property manager or sell properties. That is, I think, a completely different conversation than this bill covers. And I think I forgot your first question.
I had a lot of thoughts in there, so I may have forgotten it too. But we already, correct me if I'm wrong, but we already have regulation and statute to catch the bad actors. If somebody isn't making repairs according to the statutory time at this time, we already have mechanisms for doing that. So again, it's they have to be educated on managing their own properties, and I believe anybody that does own multiple properties is much more aware of what the regulations are, and they need to follow it. So I feel that this is just adding regulations and burdens, and we're going to constrict our housing units that are available if we make it too difficult for people to own and manage these properties.
Venetia Constein for the record. Thank you. Your first question while you were talking was about whether or not this landlord property manager permit, if they were doing other things around the properties, if they would require additional permits. That all comes with the education. If they're doing it right now and they don't have a property manager, they don't have a property manager permit, they don't know what they can and they cannot do, that's exactly what this bill goes to. And all of that information would be in the education portion of it. As to the habitability issues, right now it's my understanding if there's a habitability issue, that tenant has a choice to hold back the rent, end up in court, potentially be evicted, but they don't have the opportunity to go to the real estate division and file a complaint because there's no jurisdiction by them because that landlord is not permitted. So that was the basis for this, is to keep people out of court if it's something that can be taken care of, but also provide the foundation and the education and the permit and a bond in order for any kind of issues that do arise if they are no fault of the tenants. If the tenant does have redress, they have a place to go to do that.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. My first question is in, I believe it's section 5, sub 2, where it actually delineates who this would apply to, and I know you're changing 4 to 5, but am I reading this correctly? Is it your intention that this wouldn't apply to, say, a mom and pop landlord who maybe has 5 rentals, but they hire a property manager? Will they still be required to take out a permit, or because they have a property manager who manages their rental properties, they would not be required to have a permit?
Venetia Constein for the record. Thank you for the question. No, this is specifically for people who have 5 or more dwellings that they are doing their own management and do not have a property manager. This bill might have the unintended or intended consequence of some of those folks going out and getting a property manager and not having, if they don't want to go through this permit process. But if there is already a licensed property manager taking care of those properties, the owner doesn't need to become a landlord property manager.
Okay, and then my second question, I know we usually set, like, it's very common for us to set fees in statute, and I don't see it in here, so are you allowing the division to set them by regulations? And if so, have you spoken to the division and do you have an idea of what they are going to be charging for this permit on a first-time basis? And then I noticed in the bill as well that there's an annual renewal as well. So are they going to be paying for that renewal as well? And with that renewal, is there going to be continuing education credits that the division has talked about requiring?
Sorry, and we keep moving to see each other. Venetia Constantine for the record. I have been in communication with the Nevada Real Estate Division. The administrator should be on the phone, calling in neutral if there are questions. And yes, the amendment leaves those decisions to the commission to determine. There was a discussion about a $40 permit, but I don't know if that would be the final cost of that. But those regulations, education, all of that would be determined by the commission.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize. I'm not in property rentals at all, so I'm a little confused, nor am I an attorney. You keep saying dwellings and property or now I just forgot what's the other term she was using. Properties. Yeah, dwellings and properties. I don't think they're synonymous. In other words, I could have a property that has a threeplex on it and another one that has a duplex. So I have 5 dwellings, but 2 properties. So am I covered or required or not? That's where I'm confused.
Thank you so much for the question, Venetia Constantine, for the record. So Section 2 is actually, they're using the words dwelling units. So it's in the bill right now, it's 4 or more dwelling units. The amendment would be 5 or more dwelling units, and the meaning is the meaning that is under NRS 118A.080.
So I would have to be required if I'm going to manage my own properties, and if I understand that correct?
Venetia Constantine for the record. So if you have 5 or more dwelling units that you are renting out and you are personally managing those without a property manager, yes, you would be, under this bill, would be required to either get a property manager or go through this process to become a landlord property manager and have that different permit.
Can I ask a follow-up, Chair? If you don't mind, would you be willing to look at where I can take the education, the classes given, and pay for them, but that there's no requirement that I be licensed for them? In other words, to have real estate have the licensing control over me. And then I feel like I'm equal to a property management business. I'm just running a mom and pop shop, and why get the license? I'm just trying to keep it simple to some extent for these mom and pops.
Thank you for the question, Venetia Constantine for the record. Initially, when I thought of this, I reached out and said, is there just a way for the education is just because the commission and the real estate division are the ones who have all of this knowledge. And there isn't. The way it is written right now is you must be a real estate licensee to get that permit to have any of that education. So this is to bridge the gap between those. The reason that we're at 5 or more is 5. In my opinion, I think 5 or more is a business, because managing 5 properties, I think that you should have the education if you're doing that, and whether or not you can get that education and not have the permit lets tenants know that you've had that education. The bonding and the permit means that there is some place to go if there are issues. And this is, again, that balancing between a tenant knowing that they have some backing and have an underlying foundation of who their landlords are, if they are landlords that have 5 or more properties, and someone who is managing multiple properties on their own.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you, Chair.
And before I go on to my committee members, just since we're on the subject of education, do we know what that education looks like? Do we know what it involves? Do we know how much it is to get the license, how much it is to renew it? Do we have any of those answers?
Venetia Constein, for the record, no, that's why I have in there that the commission will make those determinations because they are the experts in the area for that education. And since this is a new area completely, they should have the time to make the right decisions about the right education and balance that out with other stakeholders who can have input on that.
And is the licensing requirements or the education to be licensed, is it going to be online? Is it going to be in person? Have you had any of those conversations, or is this kind of all left to the commission?
Venetia Constein, for the record, it would be left to the commission, and my intention or assumption would be it would be the same way that you would do it as a licensee. If that is available online already, then this would just be another piece that could be done online. If it's only done in person, then that might be how that works.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but you asked my question. Oh. That's okay.
Committee members, Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I definitely understand the issue, right? Just making sure that we have individuals that are running properties that are following all of the protocols. Do you know if there's any other states that have licensing on property managers and what that looks like in other states, what those costs look like at other states? Because that might be something like a good comparison for us to know.
Venetia Constein, for the record, thank you, Assemblywoman Torres. No, but it is something that I am happy to look into.
Committee members, any additional questions? I don't see any. We will move to testimony in support of Assembly Bill 327. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in support?
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders, and I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 327 to require the permitting of landlord property managers. This bill will help promote transparency and ensure that all tenants have well-educated property managers who understand the law, which we know can be quite complicated. We urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Jonathan Norman, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. And I will just ditto my colleagues' statements. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to testify in support to Assembly Bill 327? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support to Assembly Bill 327? I don't see anyone walking to the table. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 327, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hi, good afternoon. Once again, Chair and members of the committee, Will Pregman with Battleborn Progress. That's P as in Peter, R-E-G-M-A-N. I'll also ditto the comments from Ms. Saunders. Thank you.
Chair, we have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. We will move to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 327. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 327? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line? Oh, never mind. Hold on one second.
Sorry.
That's okay. You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Demetria Kalfas-Gordon, DEMETRIA-KALFAS-GORDON with Hive Real Estate Group. A licensed property manager is also a licensed real estate agent, and we go through continuing education classes. The permit that is added for the property management is in addition to our licensing of knowing the laws. When you add in a landlord property manager and you give them a few hours of education, that does not make them an educated person to understand all the laws and regulations that go into effect. That is not their job. And then, but you are pacifying the public into thinking that they know what all the laws are and that we're protecting them. And in fact, that is not the case. So I am greatly in opposition to this because I don't believe that this is protecting the tenants in any way. It just gives them a little bit of knowledge and not enough to make it be actually credited. Also, the verbiage of landlord property manager is going to create confusion. When a licensed real estate agent has an executed property management agreement with the owner, they become the landlord. And that is what we put on all our all our leases. When you add a landlord property manager, how are they going to distinguish between an owner landlord property manager and a licensed property manager that acts on behalf of the owner and is a landlord? So if this bill does go through, that nomenclature needs to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone? You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Bruce Langson, Brucelangson. I'm that odd case where I'm an owner-manager of approximately 1,000 units that I've built and developed and operated very successfully. And I have found that the lenders that I have to work with in order to build these projects are very restrictive on requirements for management. I have proven over the years, through the years that I have operated these properties, that I'm a trustworthy and legal owner. So adding the burden of having this license thrown on you for a person like myself or others that are well-educated, I think is just a cost that has to be passed on to the residents of each of the projects. So I'm in opposition to this amendment. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, this is Mark Lister again, Lister. And just add a little bit more to what was already said is that, again, I've been doing this for 23 years, and there's a lot in property management. I always tell my owners that there's a lot of landmines in this business. So an owner gets a little bit of training. To me, it just seems like it's going to make them more dangerous than they are right now. They don't know what they don't know. And it takes a lot of us, and a lot of us have to work together to understand, what are they doing to resolve certain problems. So I just don't see how this is really going to resolve the problem that we have right now. So I oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Crystal Sherry, KRYSTALSHERRY. I'm here on behalf of the the National Association of Residential Property Managers, the state of Nevada chapter, and we are here in opposition of AB 327. It has been mentioned before that the owners are also subject to NRS 118A, all the rules and regulations in regards to repairs, to servicing of the properties and the tenants, to fair collection of rents, and things of that nature. In my opinion, I believe that putting this burden on the owners will decrease available housing and thus perpetuate the affordable housing crisis that we're currently facing instead of helping. I would also caution as far as basic accounting principles, as far as owners maintaining their own trust accounts. That needs to be looked into, especially if that owner is facing creditors where those trust accounts can be given access to and possibly those funds taken. So that is another flaw in the bill that needs to be investigated. Thank you for your time.
You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Thank you. Lou Pombo, Papa Oscar Mike, Bravo Oscar, representing Las Vegas Turnkey Rentals. I'd like to echo the sentiments expressed before by the other members speaking in opposition here. But additionally, as this aims to seek to remedy some of the issues that tenants will often face when dealing with landlords directly who are somewhat unfamiliar with the law, I may go out on somewhat of a limb and say that many property managers, even in their practical application of classes through the real estate division and the presumably much heavier burden of requirements and education that a legally licensed real estate agent and property manager face, are still yet often somewhat unknowledgeable in terms of the practical application of the law, their testing on the law. And even so, it would result that the burden that would be placed upon individual landlords in order to seek this licensing, wherein the current licensing may even yet be deficient for continuing education or something of that nature, would be to such a great extent. I would like to, again, mirror what was said previously, insofar that a little bit of knowledge does allow for a certain degree of exploitation within the industry and field. And so by allowing this secondary type of licensing for a landlord, rather than the requirements of the actual use of a property manager, is in itself a bit counterproductive towards the end goal. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Christian Salmon, Christian, Salmon, Salmon. You know, I just want to speak to what the Assemblywoman was saying. Tenants do have an avenue. It's called the justice system. In fact, before I was a landlord, I went on my behalf as a tenant and was able to get my case heard. Sometimes it's not always the best way to do it. I understand that. But we already have these things in place. Now we're just adding more layers of government, more bureaucracy. That leads to confusion. It's why, do I go here? Do I go there? And then you have possibly unelected bureaucrats that are basically ruling over something that I didn't vote for. Who put them on a panel that if they're looking at something when a complaint comes in? So these are all things that I think we need to look at. And again, as a landlord, I want to do the right thing. I want to give my tenants a great place to live. I want them to love it. And I don't want turnover, because that obviously brings my revenue down. But then it could be going to someone else that really wants to be there. So I want to give them everything they want within reason. And that's what I do. And I do not have turnover. I would say that this is just an unfair burden because of what I've just said. And then also, I see bad actors eventually work themselves out of the system. They can't stay there indefinitely. At some point, they realize that they can't go any further. And that gives people like me that are doing the right thing great business. So I just thank you for this very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 327?
My name is Kyle Brennan. I'm with PFM Property Management. I'm a licensed broker as well, and I'm opposed to this. I feel like it creates just additional rules, and it doesn't really help anybody. So it's unnecessary. Thank you.
Can you spell your name for the record, please?
KYLEBRENNAN.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 327? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 327, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. I will move on to neutral testimony. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 327? You may begin when you're ready.
Madam Chair, apologies. I've been running between committees. Could I do support?
We will move. Let me finish neutral and then I'll come back to support. Is there anyone here in Carson City? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 327?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Sharath Chandra, SHARATH, CHA, and DRA, Administrator for the Real Estate Division. Testifying neutral, I'm available to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 327 in Las Vegas? I don't see anyone walking up. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in the neutral position?
If you'd like to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 327, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. We will now come back to testimony in support of Assembly Bill 327.
Paul Catha, Culinary Workers Union Local 226, CATHA. We support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your quick testimony. Assemblywoman, would you like to give any final remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for listening to this bill and considering it. I just want to point out a lot of the opposition was this is a complex, this is difficult, and this is what we're facing. We have landlords that are doing this that do not want to hire a property manager. This is already happening. So creating this new permit process for those folks who are managing 5 or more dwelling units but do not want to hire a property manager, trying to find that balance between landlords and tenants is what this is, so that they can at least get some education, because this is a difficult and complex area. But if the choice is between no education or some education, because there is no laws requiring property managers, this is what this bill is intended to do. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 327. 1 minute recess. I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 213. Assembly Bill 213 revises provisions governing residential zoning. Vice Chair Howdigi, you may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. I'm Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigi, and I'm proud to represent Assembly District 41. I'm joined at the table today with Christine Hess, representing the Nevada Housing Coalition, Amanda Moss from Southern Nevada Home Builders, and Josh Hicks with McDonald Carano. I'm here today because over the last 18 months, I've been working on the 2 bills I'm presenting today. Over those 18 months, I worked with stakeholders from every area of housing. People who are normally opposed have come together to support the same bills today. Coming to a consensus is incredibly difficult, but we have done the tough work. We have listened to everyone and come up with bills that I feel are the products of honest, open communication and compromise. We are all giving a little, and we are all getting a little. The first bill I am here to present is Assembly Bill 213, better known as the Housing Modernization Act. The Housing Modernization Act, which you have before you, I believe is one of the most important bills as it relates to housing this session. We will have before our institution many other housing bills, some of which I will also present, that are needed and important. But nothing will move the needle in increasing inventory more than the Housing Modernization Act. Assembly Bill 213 means more affordable housing units, more market rate units, more entry-level housing for home ownership opportunities, and more single-family residential housing so that every Nevadan has the opportunity to have a place they call home. Chair and committee members, building more affordable housing units is not enough. It's true, we need more affordable housing units, but we can't just keep our Nevada families there. The goal should be to take families in affordable housing units and transition them into market rate units, then transition them into entry-level homeownership units so that they can start to build equity and wealth, and so on and so on. According to Habitat for Humanity's evidence brief, quote, low-income households and households of color have limited access to homeownership because of barriers such as limited supply of affordable housing, restricted credit access, and systemic inequities. For those low-income households and households of color, homeownership can be a catalyst to wealth building. Home equity accounts for over half of their net wealth, end quote. Madam Chair, I have always said, if we are not helping our families build generational wealth through homeownership, then we are contributing to building a pattern of generational poverty, and I'm committed to ending that cycle. In 1965, President Johnson said, quote, many elements matter to the success and stability of our great American society. Education matters a great deal, health matters, jobs matter, equality of opportunity and individual dignity matter very much. But legislation and labors in all of these fields can never succeed unless and until every family has the shelter and the security and the integrity and the independence and the dignity and the decency of a proper home. We must make sure that every family in America lives in a home of dignity and a neighborhood of pride, a community of opportunity, and a city of promise and hope, end quote. That is what I hope for every Nevadan as well, that they live in a home of dignity and a neighborhood of pride, and a community of opportunity, and a city of promise and hope. Assembly Bill 213 will help increase inventory, speed up the application to permit process, and will directly impact the cost associated with delays, reducing the cost for Nevada families. Madam Chair, with your permission, I would now like to turn it over to Christine Hess with the Housing Coalition, and then Josh Hicks to walk the committee through the bill.
Ms. Hess, you may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Hess, and I am the Executive Director for the Nevada Housing Coalition. And thank you so much, Majority Leader, for this opportunity, but also for bringing this important bill, the Housing Modernization Act. Today, I often have spoken with many of you about the important role that affordable housing plays. This is also my opportunity to be a little more specific. Most of the time when I'm talking to you, I'm talking about subsidized housing, affordable housing that has some level of public funding in order to maintain below market rents. Today, it's exciting because I get to expand that conversation because subsidized housing doesn't exist in a bubble, right? It is also important for the coalition that we build wealth, and that wealth building comes from moving along the housing spectrum that Assemblywoman Hadagi just described for us. So I'm going to start by taking kind of a step back and being in a space that I know, which is subsidized housing. So in Nevada, we have 485,850 renter households total. That's 43% of our households in Nevada are renters. Just over half, more than 250,000 Nevada households are paying more than 30% of their household income on rent. For many of you who know, this is considered unaffordable. Nearly 1/3 of all of those renter households are paying more than half of their income on their rent. That's 138,766 Nevada households that are severely cost burdened and housing insecure. So thanks to NRS 278.235, I can actually tell you that Nevada is working hard to build more affordable housing, subsidized housing, and that's good news. We have a pipeline that's double what it typically is. Our current number of subsidized housing units, including those with rent restrictions or project-based rental assistance, is over 37,000. This inventory is tracked and managed by the Nevada Housing Division. So I know this number. I can tell you where these units are located geographically in our state, and I can tell you even what income levels are being served because of consistent annual reporting of our local governments and the highly skilled economist of the Nevada Housing Division who compiles the annual housing progress report per statute. Knowing this data has been critical to the coalition and its members to identify barriers and opportunities to address the needs of Nevadans who need housing that just doesn't pencil for the market. The Nevada Housing Coalition, as I mentioned, is also definitely interested in affordable homeownership. And when you think about subsidized housing and the renter households that are either cost burdened or severely cost burdened, how are they going to save for a home? We can't build enough subsidized housing, and we certainly can't build it quick enough. So we need to think of the whole ecosystem. Yes, increasing our supply will help, but we need to be building the housing that our communities need, housing for all Nevadans. So for the purpose of today's discussion, I am going to also focus on NRS 278.0105, which defines affordable housing in 3 tiers up to 120% of area median income. What is our need in our state? Does anyone know what our need is up to 120% of area median income? How does it look geographically in the south, in the north, in the rurals? What income levels are we building, and where are our biggest gaps? If you recall, I can actually tell you this information about our subsidized housing, right? So I know this because we track and manage it in the Nevada Housing Division. So how do we, the coalition, we, the state, we, our local governments, support all the other Nevadans that need all housing options? So I just want to thank my local government partners and the Nevada Housing Division, because through this journey, they're like, we already have this information. We collect it already. I'm like, where is it? I can't find it. And so Section 17, which is in the amendment, has been introduced to capture what already exists in a new report. My hope would be in a format similar to the Affordable Housing Progress Report. And this report will capture the 8 components that are already required in the housing element of the master plans. It will also align the 2 reports, the new one with the Affordable Housing Progress Report and their timelines, and elevate both reports to the Advisory Committee on Housing, and make it easily accessible for all of us to find, our communities, our leaders, that we can get the information we need to inform critical decisions around land use, funding, and programming, for example. It allows me, as a solutions-focused advocate, to make sure I'm supporting 2 of our critical partners in this work, both our local governments and our developers, while continuing to center on the people we're serving, our Nevadans. So finally, I'd also just like to comment specifically on Section 12 of Assembly Bill 213 and the prioritization of affordable housing projects for approval by our local governments. Not unlike market rate housing, time is money and time is risk. So some of our jurisdictions are already prioritizing projects, which is fantastic, thank you, jurisdictions who are doing this work. But by codifying this in statute, we really as a state make a statement that we want to prioritize affordable housing. And I'd also just like to point out, from an affordable housing perspective, the Clark County Red Flag Team. So this is something I've heard about anecdotally, and I went and looked at how it was done and how it was initially established. It was initially put together to walk projects through that were trying to work with the BLM. We can all imagine how they needed some help getting through that. so did our local governments and the BLM. So it acted almost as a concierge type service where a project that has an internal team with a one-on-one interface and before the fact knowledge to reduce the amount of time to review and complete the project. So it was really a significant difference. Of course, the language in Assembly Bill 213 acknowledges that all local governments have a different process and allows them to work in the best way that makes sense for their communities. But I just wanted to point out an example that I've heard about that works really well. Nevada Housing Coalition supports Assembly Bill 213, of course, and is committed to the successful implementation and being a helpful resource and partner. We're so grateful to the majority leader, and we look forward to building a more resilient Nevada by building the housing to serve all Nevadans. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Josh Hicks with McDonald Carano. I'm here today on behalf of the Nevada Home Builders Association, the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, and the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. And first of all, thank you to Majority Leader Howdigi for bringing this bill and allowing us to be part of it. It is a great bill, and it's been a great honor to be part of this, and it's a great honor to help walk the committee through this bill section by section today. I'll walk you through using the amendment on the sections that have been amended and through the bill on sections that are not under amendment. But rather than start numerically with section 1, I'd actually like to start with sections 13 and 14. Those are statements of legislative intent. And if you look at section 13, it talks about the importance of having an efficient and expeditious land use planning process and how that is important to the economic health and housing supply of the state. And section 14 also talks about the importance of a consistent and robust supply of housing in the overall affordability. And that's the law of supply and demand. That's the idea that you heard earlier about affordable housing, providing opportunities for people to move up into higher tiers of housing and opening up those affordable housing for others, and just controlling prices through having some supply. So that efficient and expeditious processing of the applications and an increase in overall supply are two recurring themes that are central to this bill. And really every section in this bill, I think, touches on those in some way, shape, or form. So I wanted to start with those just because I think it sets the table well for the other sections in the bill. I'll go to section 1 now. So now we'll go back to numerical. And section 1, this is a section that is in the amendment. The idea here is really gathering data and measuring and tracking how long it's taking for land use applications to be processed. And that's what we're trying to get at. So this would require publication on the internet of certain information related to land use planning for residential housing, including the dates the applications are filed, how long they've been pending, how many times they've been found to be incomplete, or how many times they've been rejected for being incomplete. These are all kind of critical core measurements that we think will help understand are there delays in the process, where are the delays, and I think that helps if there's future solutions that are needed to try to address those. So that is section 1, it's the measuring and tracking section. Section 2 of the bill is really just a conforming change, so it just refers back to section 1. Section 3 is another important piece of the bill. This is an amendment to an existing statute, which is 278.02327. That statute has been in place for quite some time, and it's designed to set forth a process by which an applicant, a land use applicant, submits their application, and a local government will review it to make sure it's complete. Obviously, we want those applications to be complete so that they can be processed and all the information is there. What we've found is that there are, at least from the home building perspective, we do see delays in this process. We don't always see that the 3-day period working the way it's intended to work. So the idea behind these amendments is to make some changes here to hopefully make that work a little bit better. One of the things you'll see on there is an amendment to subsection 2C1. That's a section that exists right now where if an application is rejected for incompleteness, the local government is supposed to say what's needed to make it complete. We added the word specific there just to make sure it was very clear, to be as helpful as possible to the applicant, that they know what they need to do to finish off their application. Subsection 3 of this bill is new language, and it talks about what happens if the 3-day period comes and goes and the local government doesn't respond. And what we did there is that the language says that the application would be deemed to be complete. That's not new language. That's not a new concept in Chapter 278 by any means. In fact, throughout the chapter, there are 9 different statutes where an application will be deemed complete in some form or fashion if a timeline's missed. That includes tentative maps, that includes parcel maps, that includes final maps. So this is consistent language with that. Now, obviously a local government, as long as they're meeting the 3-day period, they can reject it if it's incomplete, and it can keep going through that process of coming back to try to get fixed. But what we're trying to do is address what if there's just nothing being done there. So that's the purpose of subsection 3. You've got subsection 4, which is really that same idea. If you've resubmitted an application, there's another 3 days to review it for completeness, and that can keep going on and on until it's complete. However, section 5 does address the idea of how do we make sure we avoid that situation? How do we get these as clean as possible from the beginning? And what we've found in several of our meetings with local governments who've been excellent to work with in this process, and they've really come forward and let us know what their concerns are, is that we've seen preliminary application processes get set up where the applicant can come in, sit down with the local government and say, here's what I want to do, help me get this as complete as possible so that when I submit it, it can start going through the process and go smoothly. And everybody, I think, agrees that when those systems are set up correctly and they work right, they work terrifically and they do a good job. Of course, sometimes we have seen, to be fair, some of these systems that have also been points of delay, and we're trying to avoid that. So that's why you see in the amendment that there is an express allowance for a preliminary application process. However, those processes can't be used to subvert the intent and language of the completeness statute, so to prevent just endless delays. And also that a preliminary application process has to allow a meeting, a substantive meeting, with an applicant and the governing body within 10 working days. And that's the idea, that everyone should sit down and get that out there. And 10 working days, I know at least we've tried to work with local governments to figure out something that would work, and that's where that number came from. Subsection 6 really just also talks about the designee language, and it just makes it clear that it applies to all the divisions, departments, and agencies of the local government. Section 4 of the bill, this modifies Chapter 27 or NRS 278.160. That's the section that sets forth what should be in a master plan. And this section has one change to it, which you will see on the land use element, which is sub D, and then going down to sub 3. And this applies only in Clark County. This deals with rural neighborhoods preservation plans that are required to be preserved right now. This changes it to that those should be considered. It still would ultimately be up to the local government if they wanted to make any changes to those kind of plans. But this is all about the supply that I spoke about earlier. And obviously a key component in housing construction is land, and land supply is important. So this is a piece that gives some additional flexibility to local governments that where appropriate, they can look at these kind of areas. Section 5 of the bill that you heard Ms. Hess talk about this is an amendment to 278-235, which is the Affordable Housing Report. This is another section that is modified in the proposed amendment. And there are 2 real changes here. Well, actually, I should say there are 3 real changes. The first part is subsection 1 of that statute requires a local government to adopt at least 6 of 12 different measures that are designed to promote affordable housing. The original version of the bill had proposed a new section for increasing residential density. for multifamily or multi-story. After discussions, we felt that that was already largely included in subsection 1I. So that's why it is in the amendment being removed and just adding multi-story to I to make that clear, so that it would still be 6 out of 12 instead of 6 out of 13 choices to be made there. If you look farther down on the amendment and go down to subsection 3, this talks about the date when the affordable housing report is due, and we've moved that really to the state's fiscal year rather than a calendar year, which we thought made more sense. And as I get to section 17 that you heard Ms. Hess reference, which is a new report, that'll be on the fiscal year too, so that it's all synced up. And then you'll see some language taken out of subsection 3. I'll get to that on section 17 because it's really replicated there. And finally, subsection 4 is how long the housing division has to post the affordable housing report, and that just syncs it to August to be consistent with the fiscal year. Section 6 of the bill, this is a modification to NRS 278-250. This is a statute that deals with zoning regulations and how zoning regulations should be designed. This is the same concept that I referenced earlier with the rural preservation neighborhoods, and it changes a protection language to a consideration language. Again, up to the local governments if they want to do that or not, but the hope is that it designs some more flexibility where appropriate to consider land in some of those areas for housing. Section 7 of the bill is 278.330. This deals with tentative maps. Tentative maps is really part of the planning process. It's where land is being subdivided into more than 4 parcels, usually for home building and development. The only change here is to clarify that existing timeframes in statute for processing the tentative map apply not only to counties but to cities as well. A lot of development goes on in the cities, and we want to make sure that there's consistency in the timeframes of processing tentative maps between counties and cities. Section 8 of the bill is a modification to 278.335. That also deals with tentative maps. Tentative maps go not only to agencies or divisions within the local government, but they'll go to other agencies as well, and they'll each have certain review obligations. For example, NDEP might have some obligations, the Division of Water Resources might have obligations, the Department of Wildlife might have obligations. Right now, you can see if you go down to subsection 5, those reviewing agencies, which are all set forth in 1 of the bill of this section, have 15 days to conduct their review. So the bill here amends this, and much like the completeness statute, it requires that those be deemed approved if the 15-day period is not satisfied. Again, trying to keep things moving down the line. And again, consistent with the other deemed approval language that we've seen in the statute. 278.464 is in section 9. This is just like the tentative map section. It's just ensuring that cities are included in the same timeframes that counties are with respect to parcel maps. And parcel maps are usually 4 or less lots within a property that's being subdivided. Section 10 in the bill, this is the same concept of including cities with counties, except this is with respect to the final map. The final map is obviously where you have all your sign off. It's final. At that point, you've ticked all your boxes and you're ready to build your homes. Section 11 of the bill is, as you can see in the proposed amendment, we're proposing removal of this section. It had to do with certain issues with fire codes and multi-story buildings, but we've decided that that should just be removed from the bill, so section 11 will be gone in the amendment. Section 12 of the bill, this is another section. This is a new section in 278, and you heard Ms. Hess respond to this too. This is designed to really get affordable housing projects moving fast. The original bill language required a 50% faster time frame on affordable housing applications. There were some complications we discovered as talking to local governments with noticing requirements. There could be some times where that's just not possible to comply with. So we drafted and proposed the amendment that you can see in front of you, which removes the 50% language, but instead says that these need to be prioritized and prioritized over all other projects. Another piece of this too is as part of that prioritization, this section would allow deviations from established processes for land use applications. And again, that's designed to give local governments flexibility to see what works best for them. But one example that we think would work well, and that's why we've delineated it in the bill, is allowing administrative approval whenever possible or appropriate, rather than discretionary approval. That will speed things up significantly for affordable housing projects. So that is the change to Section 12. Section 13 and 14 I already discussed. Those are the legislative intent sections. Section 15 is an exclusion from 354.599, which is a fiscal note section of the bill. Section 16 is the effective date on the original bill. This is the effective date would be July 1st, 2023. We have recommended in the proposed amendment that at least for Section 1, the website tracking, that be moved to January 1, 2024. That gives local governments some more time to make sure they can get those systems set up and running and aren't rushed to do it. Finally, a new section, which you also heard referenced as well, which is an important part of this bill, is Section 17. And this would be a new report. And the idea behind this report would be to give information to the public, to groups like Ms. Hess's group, about what's going on, what's the planning situation, what are we thinking about in terms of affordable housing, but also market rate housing by local governments. We'd initially drafted up some language about what we thought was appropriate in that report, and we received a lot of feedback from local governments feeling that they compile a lot of that already within their master plan and their housing element of their master plan. And that is why you see the reference to 278.1601C in this section. So what this would do is require an annual report, and again, this is on the fiscal year, and it doesn't begin until July 15th of 2024, but it would be a report that would go to the Housing Division, and it would go to the Advisory Committee on Housing, and it would set forth the information already required in the housing element of the master plan, plus a 5-year look ahead for what the plan is for both affordable and market rate housing in the community. We think this will be a really good way for everybody to be thinking about top of mind supply issues and making sure we are thinking about this and being more in a proactive state for housing than necessarily a reactive state. And with that, that's the walkthrough of the bill. And I don't know if Amanda wanted to add anything that I missed, or if not, we could stand for questions.
And before we go to questions, I'd like to make some more comments, Madam Chair. I think for me, there was 3 key components in this bill that were very important. I had the opportunity to chair the Nevada Advisory Housing Committee during this last interim. And so one of the things that came out of that, and one of the things that came out of from attending the housing policy conferences that Ms. Hess had put on in the North and the South, was the need for a needs assessment. We don't know how much housing we need in our state if we don't, we don't know what we don't know. And so that was one of the most important parts for me, making sure that this is information that's readily available to us as legislators. So as we're thinking about housing policy, we actually have the data to make decisions, right? And so the needs assessment was something that came out of the housing policy conferences. Also the timelines. The timelines were very important to me because I know that for every month that a project gets delayed, the cost per door goes up, which means, it's a more expensive apartment for somebody to rent or a more expensive house for somebody to buy. So I think the timelines were also very important to me. And then also having sat on interim finance committee and seen the historic investment that our state made into affordable housing, we invested $500 million, more than we ever have, to build affordable housing projects. I had the opportunity to sit on the HMNI committee where we reviewed some of those projects. And so I know that we have a ton of affordable housing projects coming online. And so making sure that we were speeding up and prioritizing those affordable housing projects was also very important to me, because I want to make sure we get those online for our families as soon as possible. And before we go to questions, I did want to take an opportunity to thank the local governments, because we've had multiple meetings, one-on-one and larger stake group holder meetings, and I'm sure we will have more, but I want to thank them for coming to the table, investing time and walking through the bill, sharing their concerns with the bill, and coming with solutions as well. And so, Madam Chair, we are now open for questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for your presentation and for bringing such an important bill forward. We have several questions. We will start with Assemblyman Carter.
Thank you for the presentation. And my question's got to do around the rural neighborhood protection zones. I'm on the east side of Las Vegas, where a lot of people built their houses, working class people in the 70s and 80s, and now looking for a certain lifestyle. How do we have any idea what the infill opportunities, so vacant lots within the rural neighborhood protection zones are? And are there any guardrails? The people in my community up there are very worried because back again in the 80s and 90s, we watched half-acre lots all of a sudden get approved for fourplexes and sixplexes all up and down Lake Mead that we all thought were in the RMP, but they're not. And so we don't want to see that happening again. So those are my two questions.
Thank you, Assemblyman, for the question. And Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'd like to start first, and then I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Amanda Moss to follow up.
Please.
So some of the information I learned when we were working on this bill over the last 18 months is we have 11 years left of land in Southern Nevada to build on, 11 years. Once we start considering some of these RNP, it opens it up to an additional 32 years of opportunity. Nationally, there are state governments and local governments, larger and smaller than ours, that are mandating multiplexes, right? Regardless of light density, they're mandating them. And so what I saw this section doing is not going with national trends. We're not mandating this, right? We're just removing the state barriers that exist from local conversations. So where densities, land use, policy, and master plans, where those conversations I think are most appropriate at a local level. I would like to share that the committee that this bill does not change local government's current land use designation. These sections are not removing or changing zoning at all. All it's doing is allowing for the conversations to happen at a local level if the local governments decide to have it, right? So zoning changes will still have to go through the entire rezoning process at the local government level. There will still have to be public hearings where residents can come and share their concerns and their opinions. But at some point in the future, these conversations might have to happen, right? They might have to occur, especially when we're looking at combating urban sprawl, which has significant, one, environmental impacts, economic and social consequences, especially in Las Vegas, which is the second fastest warming city in the country. There's also been extensive studies on densities about water usage, right? And the more dense that projects are, the less consumptive with water that they are. And so I think more thoughtful planning that goes into density could alleviate water issues, land issues, and greenhouse gas emission issues. With that, I'm going to see if Ms. Amanda Moss has anything to add.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Majority Leader. I will never turn down the opportunity to speak to an open mic. Amanda Moss, for the record, A-M-A-N-D-A, last name M-O, S as in Sam, S as in Sam. The Majority Leader is exactly correct. Assemblyman, you mentioned protections and what the process is to notify neighbors for the development that would go on in their backyard, right? You are busy taking kids to school and taking kids to sports and after school activities, and the transparency and the predictability of knowing what is in your backyard is a very important issue, and one that we have that conversation, my individual developers as well as SNHBA as a staff and as an association in terms of policy implementation. that affects the overall development of the valley. And I'm very familiar with your area, having gone to O'Callahan Middle School, go Comets, and grown up there. And you're right, it is a very well-established area, and that's not the intent of removing the state barrier from this section. By no means is a high-rise going to go up next to a single-story 1 or 2 to an acre. That's not the intent. There are requirements in every land use plan and master plan as to what is compatible for the area. There are buffering requirements, and every individual project at every local government in both north, south, and in the rurals, the developer sits down with the community. The developer sits down. Many of my developers have 2 or 3 meetings with the neighbors that are not required to have that conversation. And that's really what, to the majority leader's point, is our intent in addressing this, is why is the state, why would a resident have to go to a state hearing to talk about what should be in their community rather than a local hearing? The government closest to the people is the one that is best left to govern. So I do not believe that this section, and why we are in full support of this bill, and why we are here today having the honor to help present it, is because we believe that doing what's right by the community should be a local conversation. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, Assemblyman Tu, also, we don't know each other yet. I don't like meetings for meetings, and certainly not reports for reports.
Can you state your name for the record?
Christine Hess, thank you, with the Nevada Housing Coalition, for the record. I did want to point out, right, that component 6 of the housing element in the master plan is actually an analysis of the characteristics of the land that's suitable for residential development, and it has a few other components. So now imagine we're all able to go in and easily access that information and our community's plans.
Assemblyman Yorick.
Thank you, Chair. And I truly want to thank you all for the courage that it took to take on such a difficult and comprehensive look at the affordable housing crisis that we are experiencing here. I applaud your efforts. That is a big undertaking, and I think that the cause is a noble one and a worthwhile one. I was waiting for your amendments, so I appreciated the spreadsheet that made it very easy to go through the amendments. But there was definitely one that I was hoping to see that my colleague here actually just addressed. And I, like the Assemblyman, represent a District 19 down in Henderson that, as my research showed, I think there was only about 5 or 6 of these RPNs in Clark County, and 3 of them are in my district. So I got a lot of emails and calls and concerns about the removal of this provision, specifically as originally intended under the statute that provided for the assurance that these protection would be kept in place for these rural neighborhoods, to now lowering the threshold to just consider them. And Ms. Hess, I know you said earlier, by codifying it, right, we're actually making a statement, a priority of our state. We're making a statement by codifying it. And so I appreciate the response that it's pushing the decision-making back down to the local entities. But I just want to make sure that I can address my concerns here, and that is that the rural preservation neighborhoods were originally designed to basically help property owners and investors know what to expect and what not to expect when they were going to be buying in these areas, and they sought to establish ground rules. So with these changes, I guess my question is, how do I respond to my constituents' concerns that have told me that we feel like we're changing the rules on them? Even this permissive language of pushing it down, that we're changing the rules after the fact on them, and they feel like they have been slighted. And I'm quite certain you're going to be hearing from some of them later. So I would just like to get that on the record and know, how can we effectively respond to this change to their questions? Thank you.
Amanda Moss, for the record, MOSS. Thank you for the question, Assemblyman. I think it is a good question, is how do we all respond to the residents that maybe are opposed to removal or changing the word preserve to consider. And I think that it's a tough conversation to have. And when I look at the role that the local government has to play versus the state government. I think that's an important distinction. And at the local level, which is what this is doing, to use your words, you said changing the rules. Should a local government, specifically the city of Henderson, that has 3 of the many rural neighborhood preservation areas in southern Nevada, if the city of Henderson does not want to change any land use designation or any master plan, they don't do that. Nothing in the bill changes or mandates the city of Henderson to make that determination. So I think that's the key in terms of residents feeling as if their densities or their land use is still protected is entirely at the hands of what the local government body would or would not do in that area. Nothing compels the local jurisdictions to upzone like so many states. There's even another Senate Bill 213 in Colorado currently that mandates, I laugh because the irony of 213 and 213, but it mandates local governments upzone everywhere, and it mandates multiplexes by right. It mandates affordable housing projects move through the process without any conversation, and that's not what we're here to do. That's not right for Nevada. That's not right for rural neighborhood preservation. So I think in terms of, just to kind of reiterate, I think the answer to both Assemblyman questions so far is that nothing compels the local jurisdiction to do anything outside of what is best for that community. Thank you.
We will move on to Assemblywoman Backus.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And the answer just raised another question for me. But one, I want to thank the Majority Leader for explaining that this bill does not impact the zoning laws. Like, to get zoning changed, we still have to go through all those processes. There will be postings, so neighborhoods are aware of what may be changing. But Ms. Moss, you raised an interesting question because I have the pleasure of representing the Lone Mountain Preservation neighborhood in Assembly District 37, along with my colleague who's representing Assembly District 3. And one of the things I noticed is out there, it's a hybrid. We have a checkerboard pattern when you pull it up on the map between Clark County and City of Las Vegas. So that raises interesting concerns when we're just lowering the standard from protection to consideration. And so I guess that raises, when we're getting all these emails, like, how do we respond to that? I mean, it's bringing an interesting concept.
Amanda Moss for the record. Yes, I think I'm very familiar with the challenges in the Northwest. It's very different than the Southwest, very different from the RMPs located in the city of Henderson. And I think it's hard for everyone when on one side of the street you have one set of rules and another side of the street you have another set of rules. But I'd like to commend the county and the city of Las Vegas for their collaborative process that they do on every aspect of planning and densities, zonings, even if you look at their drainage studies, if you look at how they coordinate right-of-ways, how they coordinate utility and planning for future growth. Are we going to require this pipe to be upsized 3 times or upsized 2 times? What is the development that's going to be in this valley or off that street? What does it look like in 20 years, and how do we plan for that? So I think you raise a question that I don't think that this bill is intended necessarily to answer. Those sections change anything outside of the processes that our current jurisdictions in that area already do.
And then, Madam Chair, I have one more question. The other thing I noticed is I realize the bill doesn't change what the definition of rural preservation neighborhoods are, but when I was taking a look, it maintains protection of historic neighborhoods. And I know growing up in Las Vegas, the community I grew up in, over the years, there's a lot of lots there that are quite large. And so I don't know why we were singling out the rural preservation neighborhoods as opposed to also including those historic neighborhoods who have very large lots that could also be developed.
Amanda Moss for the record. I think that's a good question and one that we maybe haven't discussed. I think going back to Ms. Hess's comment in the very initial presentation is we're looking at the housing continuum and the housing spectrum. And economists say that we have 8.2 people per hour per day moving to Southern Nevada. That's net moving. Some move out, some move in, and that's the net number of people we have to house. We're doing fantastic work in Southern Nevada, diversifying our economy, all the way down at every level, as well as the state. But where are they going to live? And I don't see a lot of development in the historic areas. There are, again, when we look at overlays and we look at existing land use and master plans within each of the jurisdictions, they have very rigorous requirements of similar requirements of compatibility with the neighborhoods and those things. But when you look at where the overall land is and what type of housing we're missing, that missing middle piece, those developments are not going to come around often in historic neighborhoods as they will versus that checkerboard pattern that you already mentioned is Mayor Lee approached the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association 5 years ago and said, how do I complete the streets when I have 3 lanes down to 1 lane, down to up to 2 lanes, and a bunch of vacant parcels on streets that in very established areas, and how do we make sure that the development that's coming in is compatible? And that all is a local conversation.
And if I could add, Madam Chair, I think for me, one of the things that I was looking at was, again, these neighborhoods tie up 32 years, a potential 32 years of places where we can continue to build homes for our Nevada families. And so that's one of the reasons we had looked at this. And I want to say I know how many emails you guys are getting because you represent a district, right? And your constituents are reaching out to each of you, and I am hearing from all 3 of your districts. so I am also getting those calls, but sometimes we're not here to take the easy road. We have to have these difficult conversations, and sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the best, what's going to be best for our state. And I'm having these conversations with your constituents. They are all reaching out to me, and in the end, I'm doing what I fundamentally believe is right. We are not changing zoning laws. We are taking that conversation. Again, you've heard Ms. Moss and me say that nationally, the trend is to mandate this, right? Mandate the subzoning, and we're not doing that. We thought what was best for Nevada was, again, to bring this conversation to a local level and remove the state from the conversations.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and for bringing this great piece of legislation. I think there's a lot of fixes so that we're really on the path to make sure that we're expanding access to affordable housing here in the state of Nevada. My question is whether or not there's any requirement that local governments are ensuring that, affordable housing isn't restricted to certain areas. I mean, I think we see that a lot, and quite honestly, in Assembly District 3, that is an issue that we see, that when we're building affordable housing units, we're building them in certain areas, and that in more affluent parts of town, we just don't have we're not seeing that expansion of access to affordable housing. Is there anything in place to kind of ensure that conversation is happening with local governments as we're expanding? And that might not be in the bill right now, but I think it's just a conversation we need to have.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigy, for the record. Yes, this bill doesn't address that, and I can't speak on behalf of the local governments, but I know that they are here.
If I can expand on that, Madam Chair, if I may as well, Amanda Moss for the record, I think you bring up a great point as to maybe another justification of certain sections that are maybe a little bit harder to speak to is right now if the majority of the land in Southern Nevada is designated for 1 or 2 to an acre. Right now, builders are paying, even with subsidies, over $1 million an acre. So $1 million divided by 2 is over the threshold that many in this room and in these communities can afford just for raw dirt, and that's not talking about the other costs that go into development. So when we're looking at making sure that affordable housing projects, both subsidized and naturally occurring affordable housing, is dispersed within the community and near transit, near services, near access to jobs, all those things. Again, why making sure that we're looking at densities and development standards holistically, keeping that in mind is important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that it does answer the question. It helps make sure that we're eliminating some of those barriers.
Madam Chair, Christine Hess for the record, and if I may, Assemblywoman, again, I think if you look through the components, and again, it even comes back to the land component that we talked about before, but the questions you're asking are the questions I'm asking, right? And it's not all subsidized housing. When we talk about 0 to 120% of area median income, the market can build it, right? Where are the plans and how are we building it? Where does it currently exist? And so much, right? We don't have, of our 138,000, we don't have 100,000 people without homes, right? But yet they're paying more than 50% of their incomes on rent. They can't afford where they live. They're just not being served right now by the housing that meets their needs, but we can't build it all in subsidized.
And Madam Chair, Amanda Moss for the record, if I can just, one more quick addition. In the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act, what we commonly refer to as SNPLMA, we in the development community love our alphabet soup acronyms, but SNPLMA is within the Southern Nevada boundary that allows a local government to apply for up to a 95% discount for the appraised value of a parcel to deed restrict it for the development of affordable housing projects only. And that has existed for over a decade, and those lands are available across the valley, and that is one of the items identified in the housing element in NRS 278-160 as one of the, or I believe 150, Josh, if you could, 160, okay, in 160 as one of the tools in the toolbox that local governments can utilize to ensure affordable housing projects are not centralized in one location. So that's something that's already on the books, and that's something that we have seen successfully work. Clark County designated, I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago, over 10 parcels dispersed throughout the valley, taking into consideration all of the questions and comments that you've made on the location of those parcels. And one of our builders are actually in the process of trying to develop in the Mountains Edge area a beautiful modern home, smaller home without retaining walls, with a one-car garage in a highly attractable area with access to restaurants and all of those things, to make sure that we're putting affordable housing projects everywhere and just not in my backyard over there.
I don't believe we have any additional questions. Assemblywoman Kazama.
Just a quick one, and thank you again. On section 1, where you have information on the website, and it talks about the applications and pending and notice of incompleteness, are you going to add a mechanism here? Because that list could continue to grow. What if the application is closed, it's done? Will it fall off the list? Otherwise, this could just keep growing and growing. Just a thought there.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. This is Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigi. That's what I envisioned for the bill. I think for me, that section was just more as developers are starting to plan their affordable housing development or whatever project that may be, they can get an idea of how quickly the process is going to take so that they can get an accurate bid for how much the project will cost.
I don't know if we have to add that closed applications will fall off the list or just, thank you.
We are going to move to testimony in support. Just so everyone knows, I'm going to take 20 minutes of support testimony, 20 minutes of opposition, and 20 minutes of neutral. If you're wanting to testify in support to Assembly Bill 213 here in Carson City, you may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Anastasiados. That's spelled Anastasatos, and I'm with the Griffin Company, representing the Nevada Subcontractors Association and the Urban Chamber. We want to thank the Majority Leader for her hard work on this, and we believe this bill will help expedite housing and housing development in Nevada, and we are in support, and we urge the committee to support as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Glenn Levitt, Director of Government Affairs for the Nevada Contractors Association. We represent over 450 contractors, subcontractors, and industry affiliates, primarily in Southern Nevada, and we are in support of this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Keith Lynham, LYNAM, representing the Nevada Realtors. We are proud to come to the table in support of AB 213. We want to thank the Majority Leader for working with us in the interim on a bill that will bring actionable results to the housing affordability crisis that we now face, and allow us to serve the communities that we serve. As a data-driven organization, we are especially supportive of the amendment, Section 17, assessing Nevada's housing needs is critical for planning for the future of this critical issue. But we support, and we would certainly hope that you support AB 213 as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ariel Edwards with Nevada Hand. For the record, we are in support of AB 213, especially the aspect of increasing housing affordability for Nevadans. We'd like to thank the Majority Leader for her work on this bill, and we'd like to thank the stakeholders for their consideration and further incentivizing affordable housing for our communities. Additionally, we'd like to thank and acknowledge our current partnerships with Clark County and the cities in Southern Nevada, and we are so grateful for the existing affordable housing incentives that they provide. Our local partners recognize the critical need for affordable housing, and they make way for us to continue to develop and build affordable housing units in their jurisdictions. We support the amended version of AB 213, and we urge its passage. Thank you.
Morning, Chair, or is it afternoon already? Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Devlin Doneshfrouz on behalf of NV Energy. That's DANESHFOROUZ. Here in support of AB 213, NV Energy views these changes as a positive step in improving the land use process. We appreciate the Majority Leader's willingness to work with all stakeholders on this and just urge your support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. My name is Paul Catha, and I represent the Culinary Workers Union Local 226. That's spelled CATHA. Nevada has an affordable housing crisis, and the state needs to expedite the production of additional affordable housing as much as possible while maintaining the health and safety of Nevadans. If the state is going to resolve its housing crisis and ensure that Nevadans have sufficient water in coming years, housing must be built more densely. Combining production of affordable housing and higher density housing is sound public policy. Nevada's housing crisis is the responsibility of every level of government, and every level of government has a responsibility to ensure speedy approval of affordable housing production. While the union is supportive of other efforts to ensure that the burden of the housing crisis doesn't fall on the backs of working class Nevadans, including policies like Senator Spearman's SB 426 Neighborhood Stability Bill, which would ensure rent increases do not increase faster than wages, we also recognize the need to prepare a path out of this housing crisis and recognize this bill as an important part of this effort. The Culinary Union urges the committee to support and pass Assembly Bill 213. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, John Sandy with Argentum Partners. It's JOHNSANDE. I'm working overtime today. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada State Apartment Association, the Nevada Builders Alliance, and the Nevada Car Dealers Association. We all three of those support these efforts. I know the efforts of this bill. They all wanted me to come and put our positive comments in support of this and thank the Majority Leader for her efforts in trying to increase the housing supply in our state. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and Chair and members of the committee. My name is Vanessa Dunn, VANESSADUNN with Bells and Case Government Affairs. I am here on behalf of the Associated General Contractors, the Nevada chapter. I would like to echo the comments made prior to me by the speakers. AGC supports this common sense legislation that will improve government transparency. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. For the record, Dylan Keith with the Vegas Chamber.
The Chamber is in support of Assembly Bill 213, and we applaud Majority Leader Howdigi for bringing a bill with common sense solutions that will make a difference in Nevada's housing market. The Chamber is deeply invested in increasing our housing supply because housing attainability is directly connected to a thriving business community. AB 213 improves predictability for builders and developers and encourages speedier timelines. Tracking land use applications also provides greater transparency and hold developers accountable along with local governments. AB 213 brings answers to our critical housing needs, and the Vegas Chamber urges your support on AB 213. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and committee members. My name is Nat Hodgson, Hodgson, the CEO of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. First of all, I definitely want to thank the Majority Leader a lot. To say she's worked tirelessly on this bill, be an understatement. And, something that struck me was this definitely isn't easy to bring forward, but the definition of insanity is getting pretty old to keep doing over and over again, thinking something's going to change. So I commend her. Obviously, I support AB 213 and my whole membership for three main reasons: predictability and transparency, and being able to bring the product to market faster. That's all that's going to help us with our soft cost, if you will. More efficient, predictable processing timeframes, especially in the high demand, will help alleviate our supply and demand problem that is our number one reason for the affordability constraints. So with that, I urge you to support AB 213. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Dan Morgan for the record, Morgan, on behalf of the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. I will be very brief, as my counterpart from Southern Nevada covered the comments that we're all in sync on, but would like to thank Assemblywoman Howdigi for all of her efforts and for all of you for consideration of this bill. As Nat said, it will do nothing but improve our ability to deliver housing to the state of Nevada and our citizens. Thank you very much and appreciate your consideration of the bill.
Chair, members of the committee, Jonathan Norman with the Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. I'm going to start with a caveat that, there's legal services lane, and then there's the next lane over, the shoulder and the desert. And I feel like testifying in support, I'm in the desert. The reason I'm willing to walk there is because housing and affordable housing touches every client legal aid serves right now. We just do not have enough housing for the people in our community, and that burden falls greatest on the people at the margins, and those are our clients. And so for that reason, I urge your support of this bill, and I thank the Majority Leader for bringing it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Mindy Elliott with Flynn Judici Government Affairs. I want to just step back in time when I was at a meeting with Speaker Yeager and said, we need a housing champion. I don't think I got a champion. I think we got a giant here that actually took everything that we talked about and has just worked across party lines, worked across industry lines to create something that is so necessary for our state. I've been working in the affordable housing space since 1991. I was your director of business and industry working in the affordable housing space, trying to figure out how can we deliver a product to our citizens and how can we utilize the tools that we have. Well, we are finally looking at a wonderful way to wrap all of the local jurisdictions, the legislative, the executive branch, and try to create a strategy that will move forward. I just want to compliment the Majority Leader and what she's been able to accomplish with all the partners that work so tirelessly over the several months as we've created this piece of legislation, and just want to thank her and certainly everybody here for listening to this important piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 213? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line wanting to testify in support of Assembly Bill 213?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 213, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 752, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members. My name is Vernalyn Willis, VERNALYNWILLIS, and I'm with the Asian Community Resource Center. We work alongside with the Nevada AAPI Chamber of Commerce. We are here in support of Assembly Bill 213 and thank the Majority Leader for bringing this bill forward. At the Asian Community Resource Center, housing is a top concern. We think Assembly Bill 213 will provide for faster construction of homes and a greater understanding of what Nevada housing needs are. The more homes we can build, the more stable prices come, which helps our entire community. We also believe in greater transparency between local governments and the housing industry, which the bill provides. We support Assembly Bill 213, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Broadcast, is there anyone else on the line?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. You can start when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair Marzola and members of Commerce and Labor. My name is Peter Guzman, and I have the privilege of being the president of the Latin Chamber of Commerce. The Latin Chamber of Commerce is closely connected to Nevada's housing economy because there's a direct link to our business community. Nevada business owners and entrepreneur community need housing, and Assembly Bill 213 will strengthen predictability in timelines for our builders and speed up projects. I also want everyone to know that at the Latin Chamber of Commerce 3 years ago, I implemented all of my staff and everybody at the Latin Chamber to no longer use the word affordable housing. We use dignified housing. Affordable housing has stigmas to it of crime and Section 8, and so we use dignified housing, so that's what I'll be using. We're especially excited about Section 12 presented in today's amendment, which will prioritize the processing of dignified housing projects. We hear it all the time that Nevada needs more dignified housing, but this legislation offers a fast track and will bring actionable results. The Latin Chamber of Commerce would like to recognize Majority Leader Wadegi for bringing AB 213. It's a bold bill that will increase our housing supply to help Nevadans. The Latin Chamber of Commerce urges your support on AB 213 to get dignified housing going.
Thank you for your testimony. Broadcast, is there anyone else on the line?
Callers, if you've recently joined and like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 213, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. We will move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone wishing to provide testimony in a neutral position here in? Oh, yeah. Let's start over. We are doing opposition. We are doing opposition today. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 213? Please state and spell your name for the record. You may start when you're ready.
Chair Marzola, members of the committee, my colleagues at the table asked me to go first. Joanna Jacob on behalf of Clark County. We're here in opposition under the committee rules because we're still working with the majority leader and the stakeholders on an amendment so that we can at the same time meet her very impressive goals to speed up the housing supply in our community, but also address some of the concerns of local government about the volume that we face and our current staffing issues. When that timeline of 3 days was put in place, it was in 2007. At that time, Clark County had 100 people working in our comprehensive planning department. Today, we have 18 planners. At the time of COVID, we went down to 9. our planners, and I have to talk about our staff here, because at a time when we went to remote work, that staff went in and helped the very bill proponents to keep building happening and government working. They are still with us today. We are facing new challenges. There's been a lot of talk about Clark County today, and I appreciate everything that was said, because our commission does share the stated goal of incentivizing affordable housing. We have put $120 million of our own money towards housing to Assemblywoman Torres. We have worked really tirelessly to approve affordable projects in the Southwest, and we have worked on that really tirelessly. We did 3 Pebble and Eastern senior housing. We did one in Blue Diamond Road and one at 44085 Penfield, which is largely in the southwest and central parts of Las Vegas. So we are working on that. We incentivize affordable housing already. We expedite all the applications to the top of our queue. We waive or reduce fees, all the fees that we are in charge of. So to the extent that we do the Section 12 that was spoken about, we've already done it, and we recognize the value of that work. The issue that we have is the rolling 3-day timelines. The reporting that is very important for transparency, and we are trying to find a way to have that work. We appreciate the amendment that is pushing out the effective date of that, because it is a significant staffing and technological lift for us to do that. But we're looking forward to also reporting additional factors we think are important about including the time for developers and applicants to return their materials to us. We think that's a fair metric to also
Mrs.
measure.
Jacobs?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Your time's up. Can you wrap up your testimony,
Yes, I
please?
can.
Thank you.
So we want to work on a timeline that will work with us. We have had a senior planner position open for 700 days. We have some significant staffing challenges. We hope to continue to work with the proponents, and I'll concur with the comments of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Kelly Crompton, representing the City of Las Vegas. We'd like to thank the bill sponsor for working with us over the last couple of weeks as the bill was introduced, to hear our concerns as a group of local governments, but also with the stakeholders, and address some of the concerns we had within the bill. We appreciate the amendment. I think it addresses some of the things we discussed, but doesn't address some of the things that we had, spoken about significantly. For the City of Las Vegas, Section 3.5 regarding the pre-application process is still a big concern for us. The City of moving that from the ability to require it to clean up the application process to make sure that all things are in order versus having this as a voluntary process. The city over the last decade has worked with the stakeholders of this bill to streamline our process and make sure that nothing is missed so that they can go through the planning process very quickly. I will say that some of the stakeholders said that they want to see predictability and transparency for the process. Many of us have a planning commission schedule that shows you exactly when you submit your application, how long it's going to take to get through the planning process. For the City of Las Vegas, that's about a 2.5 month process if you get your application in and there isn't issues. That also includes that the developer or the proponents respond in a timely manner as well. We bring in subject matter experts. That includes planning officials, building and safety officials, fire officials, I'm forgetting one, public works officials, to make sure that the development applicant gets everyone in the room at the same exact time instead of bouncing you from department to department to department to department, wasting their time. We bring them all into one room. We get their applications together. I will tell you that some of the things that we see that take time is the engineering process. We just had an application that was stalled because fire trucks didn't have turnaround radius within an apartment complex. That's a huge safety concern for us. Parking. We hear neighbors all the time say, we don't want you to park on our streets. We want to make sure there's ample parking. Sometimes those are the hiccups. But we make sure that those processes are done very quickly, very efficiently. The other thing I would like to just say is that we look forward to working with the bill proponents. If the speedy process that we hold, they want to start building those projects in our community, we welcome that. We want to see these processes as well as we have a lot of unhoused people within our city limits, and we want to make sure they have affordable, safe housing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Nicole Rourke, representing the City of Henderson. I would like to echo the comments of my colleagues and also thank Assemblywoman Hadegui and the proponents of the bill for working with us. We think this amendment has actually come a long way in answering some of our concerns. We're here under the rules to mention a concern still under Section 1. Ms. Jacob talked about staffing issues. We have similar concerns. Under Section 1, this is all encompassing in 278. So this includes entitlements and it includes permits. So to give you an idea, we did 699 applications for entitlements last year. We did over 12,000 in permits. And so to include that level of data is going to take us a lot of time and a lot of labor. And our concern is that it actually works against the intentions of the bill where we want to move applications faster. Rather, we're going to have to pull staff off with the existing staff that we have to work on data collection and making this data in a comprehensible form. So our concerns still lie in that section, but like I said, this amendment comes a long way to answer our concerns in other sections, and we certainly are supportive of moving affordable housing forward and making those applications a priority as stated in Section 12. So again, we look forward to continuing the work and thank the sponsor for her efforts.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Cadence Matievich, C-A-D-E-N-C-E, M-A-T-I-J-E, V like Victor, I-C-H, and I have the privilege to represent Washoe County. We too would like to thank the bill sponsor for including us in the conversation and being open and listening to our concerns with the bill as introduced. We did just get the amendment yesterday, so big bill, big amendment. Are still processing it back at our home office. We think that we're there, but again, under the rules of your committee, because we may still have a few technical issues to work through. We are here. We too, Washoe County, very much supports the goal and what's intended with this bill. Our county commission housing is included in their strategic plan. At the workshop on the strategic plan, gave direction to our staff to look for ways to incentivize affordable housing in our community. And so we look forward to the continued conversations and how we can participate in making this bill something that gets all of us towards our objectives. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone's testimony. Is there anyone else here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 213? I don't see anyone. I see you guys have already started sitting in Las Vegas, so you may begin when you're ready. If you're testifying in opposition, please remember to state and spell your name for the record. Everyone has 2 minutes each. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Barris Kaiser. Thank you, Chairwoman and committee, for allowing us to speak. I have a few things I want to touch on this Assembly bill. And first, just as a general statement, you've always heard that if a bill has a slick name behind it, be cautious. And the Housing Modernization Act definitely fits that description. Time and time again, as the bill was introduced, you heard that the process changes are mostly codifying what we want to see happen. And then what I think you just heard was emotional testimony from frontline employees at each one of these local governments that are going to have to turn around and bear the brunt of the timing that's discussed in this. And you heard them with shaky voices telling you that they are concerned. And I would encourage that that's got to be listened to. The fact that that it was mentioned that there's a planner that's been looked for over 700 days tells you that this is a concern coming forward. The next item that I'd like to make sure I touch on, time and time again, you heard as the bill was introduced, talking about predictability. Section 4, where the movement from the state protection on rural neighborhood preservations is removed, is absolutely going to have the effect at the local level of removing the teeth behind our protections to live in these areas. You heard the description that land is a limited resource, and we have 11 years. That with this, we'll gain 32 years. I distinctly heard that conversation. That completely ignores the fact that the true effect that's going to happen with this bill is it's going to prevent and encourage or discourage investment in our existing communities that need reinvestment. There will be no point for these groups to go forward and try to reinvest in areas that need reinvestment to bring jobs, to bring housing, time and time again, if they can go to areas that have open land. This also ignores the fact that, at least in southern Nevada, the move of the BLM disposal boundary has been a move that has happened and has been able to support the area to allow its growth. The final item that I want to make sure I touch on is there was discussion about broad coalition building in this bill. But what you also are going to hear and see as you see the more than 60 people that are here in Las Vegas in opposition, including myself, is that
Mr. Kaiser?
the residents were not.
Mr. Kaiser,
Yes.
can you wrap up your testimony, please? Your time has ended.
Yes. The residents were not part of that coalition, and the industry was the only members brought into that coalition. Thank you very much.
Michael Walsh, WALSH, 4185 West Serene, Las Vegas. My concern is the change of protect and preserve in favor of consider. Somebody mentioned that this allows local conversations to happen. Local conversations are already happening. Myself, along with all the owners in the Dean Martin RMP, spent the last year arguing and fighting a zoning change for rural estates that we lost, despite all the opposition. And now we're taking that fight to court, the District Court of Clark County, and I will have that lawsuit in your inboxes after this meeting. But the point here is, in that briefing, you will read that protect and preserve is a responsibility that the officials need to adhere by. Removing that removes that responsibility, and that's not right. And you'll see in the lawsuit why it's important to leave that wording alone. From a land perspective, you know, I don't believe that changing that wording is going to open up the land. 87% of the land in Nevada is owned by the federal government. As he mentioned, maybe we should start looking at the BLM. There's plenty of land out there to be preserved. Thank you for your time.
My name is Carol Peck, CarolPeck. I'm strongly opposed to this on a lot of levels. First of all, this bill is really more sounds like a keep your developer and realtor in business. I don't see any citizens outside of the industry on that board, and very little mention actually of citizens. We live here, we work here, we have bought and improved our properties, and now it's according to what a couple of you have said about infill building and removing variances or changing zoning or whatever, even though you're saying that's not it. There's a possibility that all my work and my perceived later years of life where I was going to enjoy what I've made can go right down the tubes. Because if you start putting infill building and low-income housing in higher neighborhoods, it's not the low-income housing so much as it is the perception of the neighborhood going down or whatever. But the important thing is the city here, I'm in the patchwork quilt area, and the patchwork is city and county. The city wanted to put a 120,000 square foot gym 2 blocks from my house. And right now we are up to have affordable housing put in there. I don't have a problem with that. I've been a realtor since 1978. What I do have a problem with is that everybody comes in, helps these people get into affordable housing, which is wonderful, and then everybody goes home. And these people cannot continue to support the maintenance and everything else on these homes that they are entitled to. And that's when it starts to hurt those of us who are already in place. The administrative approval, to say the least, curdles my hair. If you go to administrative approval, right now we fight like dogs to get these developers to talk to the neighbors in the proximity of some of these changes that are going on. And, oh yeah, we did it. And then the neighbors show up and say, no, we never heard from them. A lot of that is being said about this bill as well.
Mrs. Peck, Mrs. Peck, if you can please wrap up your testimony. Your 2 minutes is over.
Okay. I see no reason to change the verbiage from required to consideration. The only reason you would do that is if you could move forward with something that is going to hurt everybody up here. If you're from this area and you're on that committee, I suggest you come back and visit your area again. Thank you.
Hi, Bruce Langson again, Brucelangson. I am a developer. I've done subdivisions, and I've done lots of apartment projects myself, and yes, the land prices here in Las Vegas are very high, and they're very high because it's limited. I think each and every one of you legislators has a job to start pressuring BLM to opening more land. That will change that whole subject of land cost and will allow the affordable housing first off, it'll lower land values across the valley, and secondarily, it will make large plots of land available for new subdivisions for specific markets. Changing the current zoning would just do nothing but penalize me and undermine my hard work to live in this area. I love this area because it's quiet, and I want to stay there the rest of my life. I'm in the process of building my final house for myself and my wife. So please maintain, preserve, and not allow consider. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Tommy Lopresti. Last name is Lopresti. I'm here speaking also on the verbiage amendment mentioned on pages 7 and 12 of Assembly Bill 213 as it pertains to the rural neighborhood preservation areas. I keep hearing that it doesn't impact zoning or change the process at a local level, so it makes me wonder why make the change at all. This may seem like a subtle change, but it's one that will permit governing bodies and to drastically alter the character and density of our rural neighborhoods. If you search for definitions of preserve and protect, the same synonym is used, defend. That is what our group has been doing in regards to the RMP for decades while losing tens of square miles that were once protected in the interim. There must have been a reason that these words were originally used when drafting this bill, and I believe it's because the authors knew that these were rare and strategic areas that would one day face a need for such strong and defined barriers. It seems as though that time is now. Between waivers of development standards, special use permits, and sliding scale of buffer zone requirements, developers have a myriad of tools at their disposal to push projects through that border on responsible development, where all we have is the current verbiage in this bill. We're all for growth and development as long as it is done with respect, responsibility, and thoughtfulness of the areas in which it takes place. We ask that you admit this change to AB 213 and leave us the small advantage we have over defending what's left of our rural neighborhood preserves, as we have become the minority in what developers claim to strive for when referring to diversity in development. For one referring to diversity in housing and protect these areas that I'd venture to guess that many of these subsidized housing recipients might strive to call home themselves one day. Thank you.
You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Kathleen Buchanan, Kathleen, Buchanan, Buchannan. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. I'm in opposition to AB 213. Assembly Bill 213 is designed to revise provisions governing residential zoning to destroy the Lone Mountain Rural Preservation District. Essentially, what is being proposed is to simply loosen the standards by creating the narrative of flexibility. Or as I heard today, the Housing Modernization Act, meaning increased residential density for multifamily or multi-story residential development. This would include affordable housing projects through efforts to rezone, diminishing the original intent of the land use. In a prior presentation by Clarion to the Clark County Commission and Planning Commission, it was conveniently glossed over by the presenter of this bill regarding the 10% minor deviations they may want to allow by administrative approval, saying it applies to a few minor things such as signage. It appears to include lot size, wall and building heights, setbacks, parking lots, etc. In essence, what is being proposed is to neuter the rural overlay plan as it exists without removing it completely. Finally, as the sponsor of AB 213, Vice Chair Howigee of the Committee on Commerce and Labor should disclose she is a real estate agent
Mrs. Buchanan?
that will benefit.
Mrs. Buchanan?
Yes.
Your 2 minutes has ended. Can you please wrap up your testimony?
Absolutely. Ms. Howigee should disclose she is a real estate agent that will benefit financially
Mrs.
from
Buchanan?
the revised
Mrs.
provisions.
Mrs. Buchanan, please wrap up your testimony. And I just want to...
I have one sentence left. I said finally here. Governing residential zoning. As such, she should recuse herself from voting on this matter to do otherwise represents a substantial conflict of interest.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan, for your testimony. And I just want to remind everyone that you can always say ditto to the previous comments. I am actually giving opposition 30 minutes. I gave support testimony 20. I am going to give opposition 30 minutes, but we are going to actually go to the phone lines right now. And so broadcast, is there anyone on the phone lines?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 213, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 503, please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Star Stewart. I'm a Henderson resident, born and raised Nevadan, a taxpayer, a full-time working mom who has worked in the energy efficiency field for almost 25 years, and I own a home inside the Mission Rural Neighborhood Preservation Area. The Mission RNP is a beautiful neighborhood where the yards and homes are well taken care of, not because we have an HOA, because we don't, but because the residents in our neighborhood take pride in the area. We enjoy our rural lifestyles. We appreciate the beautiful Nevada desert, and we want to preserve it, not only for ourselves, but for generations to come. I am 1,000% opposed to AB 213 as it pertains to rural neighborhood preservation areas. I'm opposed to any language changes to the NRS that take protections away from rural neighborhood preservation areas. There are approximately 30 acres of land across the street from me. This land has gone up for auction in the past, but it did not sell. Only large-scale developers have that kind of money to buy land in bulk. I believe these developers don't want to buy the land now because the profit margin isn't good enough since they can only build 1 or 2 homes per acre. This bill would change that. We know local governments typically follow state laws and changes to those laws. As soon as this bill is passed, a large developer could come in and build 4 more homes per acre on that land. This would fundamentally change the character of our neighborhood, which was the original purpose of the RNP protections in the first place, and it would bring down home values in the process. The RNP language changes in this bill are not good for anyone except the builders and developers who want to add more money to their bank accounts. I ask that no changes be made to the NRS pertaining to rural neighborhood preservation areas by either removing these sections of the bill or voting no on AB 213. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cassia Lopez, CASSIALOPEZ. I'm representing myself as a rural resident. I oppose Assembly Bill 213 due to the wording change from ensure protections to ensure considerations. This wording seems very dangerous to rural areas, mainly because many of these areas are unincorporated Clark County or townships, in which those places, the most local government is the county, and oftentimes does not fully represent us the way we'd like to be represented. Considering the fact that the conversation about the neighborhoods holding up to 32 years of growth does not help with the reassurance that these areas will not be targeted for rezoning in the coming future. Please reconsider changing this wording, and thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 359, you are unmuted and may begin.
My name is Nicole Chandler, NICOLECHANDLER. I am a homeowner in the Northwest Rural Preservation. I do ditto the previous comments from neighbors. Would also like to add or clarify the 32-year tie-up that the Assemblywoman that introduced this bill made the statement on. I don't think the land is tied up. Property owners here have paid more money for these properties. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars renovating, updating, upkeeping these properties. So this land is not tied up. And to remove this protection verbiage, we all know is, is just the first step to taking away all of the rural preservations, property values, crime, traffic, all the things that come along with the Modernization Act. And if you look at all the people that are in support of this bill, 99% of them are people that are going to profit from this bill being passed. I do oppose this bill. Thank you.
Hello, excuse me. This is Lisa Mayo, LISA MAYO. I am here in opposition to AB 213. I think when there's so much time spent on this bill trying to tell us that the section 3 that removes the word preserve to consider, and so much time is spent saying it doesn't matter, tells us it does matter. It does matter because when we're in a fight trying to save rural neighborhoods, you know that the developer and others will come and say, oh, but AB 213 and the NRS says that we only have to consider it. This language needs to be removed. It needs to be removed. Everybody said it doesn't matter. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's not going to matter locally. So please remove it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alicia Nilsson. Last name is Nilson. I am also a resident in the RNP out in Henderson, the River Mountain Ranch Estate. And I'm going to ditto everything that has been so far or said so far regarding the removal of the words protection and preserve on pages 7 and 12 for the rural neighborhoods. My other big concern with this is I heard a lot of the presenters talking about how the goal is to speed up the building process. And while I can appreciate that, my concern is that with that building progress and speed happening, are there any stipulations or anything in place to ensure that the infrastructure necessary to support and sustain these newly developed areas is also going to happen, specifically healthcare, making sure that we've got adequate providers for the new population, as well as public safety, police and fire, and then our other utilities as well, such as the roads, such as internet, and all of those necessary structures, because at least out in Henderson, this is going to affect your suburb areas where some of the only places where there's land left. So again, the removal of the preservation and protections, I am opposed to AB 213 for these reasons. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. And I just want to state at this time that it has been 30 minutes of opposition testimony. And so we are not going to take any more testimony in opposition. But anyone who did not get to speak today, you are more than welcome to submit your testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 213 in writing to the committee secretary. We are now going to move to testimony in neutral to Assembly Bill 213. Is there anybody here in Carson City wishing to testify in the neutral position? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in the neutral position of Assembly Bill 213? I see two people sitting. Are you guys testifying in neutral or opposition?
Madam Chairwoman Marzola, I am here for opposition.
Okay, so I have closed.
But you cut our time.
Correct. I have closed opposition.
Is it possible to request the kindness of additional moments because we have over 15 people that came here?
I am sorry. I've given opposition testimony more time than I've given support, and so please submit your comment or your testimony in writing.
Thank you.
To the committee. I appreciate it. So if you can let anyone that is there that is wanting to testify in neutral have a seat. Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to testify in a neutral position to Assembly Bill 213 in Las Vegas? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
If you'd like to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 213, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Testifying in Las Vegas.
Hold on one second. I'll come back to you.
Caller with the last 3 digits 500, you are unmuted and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is John Leleu, L-E-L-E-U, here today representing NAOP. I'm going to make this really brief. I apologize. I was unable to join the call to submit testimony in support. I'm going to ditto everything that was said earlier, and I will submit my testimony in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. Broadcast, is there anyone else on the line wishing to testify in the neutral position?
Caller with the last 3 digits 889, you are unmuted and may begin.
Hi, my name is Janet Lacombe, Lacombe. I am a resident of one of the rural preservation areas. I would like you to consider that recently there was Bill AB 220 up regarding wells and septic conversions.
Ma'am?
That the committee was.
Are you testifying
yes,
on?
I'd like the same length.
Are you testifying on Assembly Bill 213 today in the neutral position?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's discuss Assembly Bill 213, please.
The language in that bill was put at the state level when people asked, why isn't this at a local level? This is a local matter. And the response was, at the state level, we can cut through all the red tape and not have to deal with all the localities for septics and wells. So why can't the citizens be afforded that same respect of having language at the state level?
Ma'am?
Thank you. Bye.
Hello, everyone. CYRUSHOJJATY. We'd like to thank the Assemblywoman and even get a good presentation from the Home Builders Association. You know, I've met a lot of their members before about this issue. We need to expand housing supply, speed up the process, but I would consider also trying to make sure that certain areas are preserved. The culture, the feel, the demographics, all those things matter, definitely. And also, I like to ditto that comment of what he said about the BLM, where the process can get in the way and can have an impact on housing affordability, because I believe I spoke to Mrs. Moss about this, and she told me about this several years ago. So hopefully you can make some changes to it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in a neutral position to Assembly Bill 213? I don't see anyone. Vice Chair, would you like to give any final remarks?
Thank you, Chair Marzola. First, I want to state on the record that I do not hold a real estate license. Also, Chair, I am working on a tweak to Section 8 to address water purveyor issues. That is something that is unique to Southern Nevada. I want to thank the local governments for sharing their concerns. I know staffing is an issue. We hear it in this body every single day from state agencies, so I know that they are facing those challenges as well. Related to Section 1, the 3 days to review an application is already in statute. And what I envision here is simply saying you have everything you need to start the review process, and if you don't, then you are incomplete. With the reporting, I appreciate the remarks that were given from our local governments on developers or engineers taking too long to respond as well. The great part of this bill is that it will also hold developers to deadlines and hold them accountable as well if they continue to churn in incomplete applications or delay the process as well. And that's where the reporting, that information comes online, so that we as legislators can see that information and see where the delays are occurring. I also do want to commend the City of Las Vegas for their comments on the pre-application process. I've heard from a lot of people that they have one of the best processes, and I want to make sure that we continue to have discussions on this process to be sure their process is not negatively affected. I know it's hard for the local governments to get up and have to oppose this bill. Nobody wants to oppose housing. We all want the same thing, which is homes for the people we represent. I look forward to continuing our discussions so that home means Nevada for every Nevadan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you again for bringing this bill forward. 1 minute recess. Well, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 213. 1 minute recess. The committee will now come back to order. Before I open up to the next bill, I just want to remind everyone that there will be no personal attacks in this committee. We are here to talk about the bill and the bill only, whether you're here to testify in support, in opposition, or in neutral. So I just would like to take the time to remind everyone. And with that, I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 298, which revises provisions governing houses. Vice Chair, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. In the words of my colleague, I am still Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigi, representing Assembly District 41. And I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 298. I'll keep my opening remarks brief, since I've already laid out the work that I have done on these two bills and the time that all the parties have invested into producing the bills that you have before you. I'm joined at the table today with Keith Lynham from the Nevada Association of Realtors and Jonathan Norman from Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. We are a very unique team here together, Madam Chair, but one who is here in support of a common goal to achieve affordability in housing. I would first like to turn it over to Keith Lynham with the Realtors for remarks, Madam Chair, and then to John Norman with Legal Aid Center, and then I will take back over to walk the committee through the bill if that is okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, as mentioned, my name is Keith Lynham with the Nevada Realtors. I am the legislative chairman for the Nevada Realtor family. We want to thank the majority leader for working with us diligently several times during the interim to bring some common sense solutions to the affordable housing and those that are leasing and those that are renting those homes out. We represent both sides of this. You've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. We represent both sides. I believe we're unique in that we represent landlords and we represent tenants. And so we are at the forefront of this. We want to make sure that we come to support this important bill. Again, we appreciate the majority leader for bringing this forward, and we appreciate the opportunity to come forward with a solution, and we are in full support of AB 298. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jonathan Norman, Norman. I'm with the Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. We, along with other nonprofits, sit at the epicenter of the housing crisis. In addition to representing tenants facing eviction, our clients include children in foster care, adults in guardianship, elders who have been defrauded, families struggling to get education supports for their special needs children, victims of human trafficking, and those fleeing domestic violence. The thread that ties all of our clients is housing. Their legal issues are varied, but across every service area, our clients are struggling with housing. When a tenant moves to Nevada or faces housing transition, there are barriers to housing that are complex, like housing stock, rising rents. But there are other barriers that are artificial and center around some landlords who use application fees as a source of profit. When tenants are competing for housing in an ecosystem of housing scarcity, they often have to submit numerous applications and pay the associated application fees. When those fees are artificially inflated beyond the cost of processing the applications and running background, it robs working people beset by inflation of the resources to pay security deposits or first month's rent. No landlord should see this as an opportunity to profit, and after speaking with many landlords in the industry, I am convinced this is a practice that the vast majority of landlords believe should be illegal. We find tenants who are asked to pay a fee for everyone in their household, including for children. If a landlord does not conduct a check, the tenant should be refunded that money. In 2022, there was an article about a Clark County teacher who was living in her car, and she had paid almost $1,000 in application fees. We regularly hear stories like that in our offices. Transparency and honesty in fees is fundamental. If a tenant is going to be charged a fee in addition to rent, that should be plainly disclosed when the tenant is considering renting the unit. This bill addresses both these concerns, the disclosure issue and the application fees. And again, in speaking with industry, I believe there are a few bad actors who hide fees and then assess them. Whether that is a remote control fee for a furnished apartment that has a TV or a light bulb change fee to paying rent via a portal. Consumers deserve transparency, and good landlords already provide it. This bill reaches those landlords who are operating in an unfair and frankly sneaky manner. And obviously, sitting here with the realtors, I am convinced that most landlords, including, the ones I have talked to throughout this process, are doing the right thing. This bill is reaching those people who are hurting our clients and operating kind of outside of I would say, the moral framework of our ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, like I said, we are a unique team. You don't really see the Nevada Association of Realtors and Legal Aid Center at the table together, but like Mr. Lynham said, they were happy to have a seat at the table with us because they represent both the tenants who they show these rentals to, and they represent the landlords as well. And so I want to thank both of them for being here, and I want to thank both of them. This was a labor of love, and it's something that we've worked on for a very long time. With your permission, Chair, I would like to walk the committee through the bill.
Please.
Section 1 deals with returning any fees to applicants who apply for a unit but were never screened. So, Madam Chair, if 10 applications come in from one unit and the landlord or property manager take that very first application, then the fees for the other 9 would be returned. Section 2 adds appendixes to the end of a lease. One, outlining all of the fees that can be charged, and the second with a Know Your Rights section. Section 3 is being deleted completely by the amendment. Section 4 creates the rent stabilization pilot program for seniors and those on disability. Madam Chair, I'm open for any questions.
Committee members, does anyone have any questions? Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you. Love to see all of you at the table there together. So I just wanted to put on the record and make sure under Section 1, where if we run the application fee and it is denied because of what comes up in the report, that no refund is required, because we would deny the applicant, then we're keeping their fee, and then we are moving to the second person or third or whatever it might be.
Assemblywoman Sandra Haudegui, for the record, that is correct, Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, committee members? Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I just, once again, not being in the rental business, I may not understand the term, so please just put up with me. On Section 2, looks like sub O, a separate appendix that contains a clear and concise explanation of each fee that may be charged during the term. Help me understand, if your renter you're in an HOA development, which normally the landlord pays the HOA fees, correct? I just want to make sure.
That all depends on the lease agreement, Assemblywoman Sandra Haudegui, for the record.
Okay, well then, so let's say they do, or the owner of the property is still responsible for that dwelling. So if the renter does a violation of HOA and is hit with a fee, I'm trying to think of, is that covered under this part? Or, because I would know, if I was the owner, I wouldn't necessarily know how much the HOA is going to charge me, or how would I address some of those, I guess what I'm getting to is, how do I get to those unknown fees that pop up regularly? I mean, I own a house and I have regular unknowns that occur. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Because the language is very precise to me.
Thank you for that question, Assemblyman, and this is Assemblywoman Sandra Haudegui, for the record. And Assemblyman, what I envisioned for this was an appendix listing all of the fees that can be charged. And so if the fee is not listed on this appendix, and that is part of this bill as well, then they cannot charge the tenant. And we heard it earlier as well with a very similar bill. This is just so that a tenant can, in one quick glance, look at all of the fees that can be charged. If a landlord or property manager has in that appendix a line item that says any fees as a result of a violation of an HOA will be paid for by the tenant, as long as it's listed in here. If they do not list it in here, according to this bill, it would be unlawful for the landlord or property manager to assess any fees that are not listed in this appendix.
For clarification, so I wouldn't have to list the amount, just that the renter would be responsible for those violations that the HOA or what some of these unforeseens may be. In other words, they throw an excessive party and get fined by HOAs or something, or they rent it out, sublease it, and there's expenses there that come into play. I can just say that they'd be responsible for any fines, fees, et cetera, and don't have to list the exact amount. Am I getting this correct?
It was my vision that for anything that is a hard cost, right, that be listed. So if they are going to charge a fee for a light bulb change, right, that be listed in there. If there is an unknown fee that they cannot predict, right, as long as it is listed in there. But for example, I know that we've come across some lease applications where in order for a service, if something breaks, right, then similar how you would have a deductible to your insurance. I've seen that in rental lease agreements as well, right? So that deductible would have to be listed. I want every single fee that is a hard cost fee to be listed on one appendix. And if there is an unknown fee, if it's listed on there, but it's unpredictable, as long as that is listed on there, then if it's not listed, then it can be assessed. If it is not listed on there, then my new language in this bill says that it would be unlawful for a property manager or landlord to list it, to charge for it.
I think I've got you, but I think I'm going to need I think I understand, but we'll need an attorney to actually figure out that verbiage to do with those unattended incidents. So thank you, Chair.
Committee members, any additional questions? I don't see any. Thank you for the presentation. We will move to testimony in support of Assembly Bill 298. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to testify in support? Please remember to state and spell your name for the record, and each person has 2 minutes. You can go ahead and start when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Dylan Keith with the Vegas Chamber. We are in support of this bill. We believe that it removes significant barriers that are experienced by folks that are trying to rent in good faith, and it also protects a lot of the landlords that are doing this the right way and using their morals to do, honestly, a service to as many people as they can, and it specifically points out bad actors. So for that perspective, thank you very much. We urge your support on this bill.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders, and I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 298. First, I want to thank Assemblywoman Hadegui for reaching out and meeting with tenant stakeholders on this bill. We are thankful to see so many bills seeking to address access to safe and affordable housing, the #1 issue facing Nevadans today. The rapid increase in housing instability is undermining educational and economic opportunities in our communities across the state. It's time that housing is seen as a right and not a commodity. Our communities cannot thrive when Nevadans are struggling to maintain safe and secure affordable housing. Housing stability is the foundation for children's educational success, positive health outcomes, economic opportunity, and equitable, vibrant communities. Tenants in Nevada have struggled to keep up with rising rent costs and deal with lackluster tenant protections for far too long. AB 298 is a step in the right direction to ensure that Nevadans can find and maintain affordable housing without being stretched too thin. We urge your support and look forward to action on tenant protections this session. Thank you.
My name is Paul Catha, that's spelled C-A-T-H-A, and I represent the Culinary Workers Union Local 226, and we support Assembly Bill 298, and we thank the Assemblywoman for bringing it forward. Assembly Bill 298 addresses the predatory behavior that has been on the rise in the rental market in the last few years and which is damaging Nevada. As recently stated by Governor Lombardo's team at GOED, lack of affordable housing is one significant barrier to economic development in Nevada. This bill will protect Nevada's residents and its economy by making Nevada's housing market more affordable and predictable. In a 2022 survey of Culinary Union members, 21% said their rent had gone up $500, 21% said that they are charged monthly fees in addition to rent, and 15% said that they pay more than $100 in fees each month. Rent increases have outpaced wage growth. From the first quarter of 2019 through the second quarter of 2022, market rate rent in Las Vegas increased 33.1%, while average weekly earnings only grew 21.4%. In 2021, investors bought 18% of homes in the Las Vegas metro. In some areas of the metro, investor purchases accounted for as much as 26%, over a quarter of homes sold. According to the January Census Bureau's Household Pulse survey, 49.8% of adults in Nevada experienced difficulty paying for the usual household expenses in the last 7 days. Already in the first week of 2023, Las Vegas had the most eviction filings among most major U.S. cities. While the Culinary Union supports some of the stronger measures contained in Senator Donate's SB 78, the provisions of this bill pertaining to application fees and tenant transparency for other fines and fees would certainly be a step in the right direction. The Culinary Union believes that every Nevadan deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Nevadans should not have to choose between having food on the table and having a roof over their head. And the Culinary Union urges the committee to support and pass Assembly Bill 298. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Marzola. And for the record, my name is Eric Chang, ERICJNG, here on behalf of One API Nevada. We want to thank Assemblywoman Haudegi for presenting this bill. For last year, our organization has knocked on more than 73,000 doors in the API community and talked to more than 6,000 of the households. This is the first time we found out that housing has replaced healthcare and education to become the most prevalent issues for our AAPI working families. So I want to ditto my partner's comment here, and we want to make sure that this has been proposed and it's a positive outcome and the right step for our community. So thank you so much. Urge for your support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Now we will go to Las Vegas. If you are wishing to testify in support to Assembly Bill 298, you may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Chair Marzola and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Maria Moore, M-A-R-I-A-M-O-O-R-E. I'm the state director for ARP Nevada, and I speak on behalf of ARP Nevada. And thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Assembly Bill 250 today. It is important that there is transparency and clarity to the rental application process for residential rentals. This legislation clarifies that all owners, managers who collect application fees will provide prospective renters with a written disclosure including the amounts. Further, the legislation also creates a process for prospective renters to recover a paid application fee if the prospective renter's application is denied. This helps in reducing monetary burdens on renters who invariably are already burdened with the ever-increasing rents. It is important that rental fees and deposits are not charged when there is no apartment to rent, and when they are charged, they should be reasonable and proportional to the cost of the landlord of processing that application. Similarly, when it comes to a deposit, especially for older adults who rent, who tend to be on fixed incomes and are more likely to be low income and cannot afford to pay excessively high application fees and security deposits. We applaud the legislation of Majority Leader Haudegi and thank the committee for your time and consideration.
Assemblywoman Marzola and committee members, my name is Laura Tooker, L-A-U-R-A. Tooker. I'm a member of Green Valley United Methodist Church, which is a proud member of Nevadans for the Common Good. Previously, you've heard about our organization and our unique position to hear from residents, so I won't repeat that. But I have submitted written testimony. I would like to take the next few minutes to share a specific story that exemplifies our stance. We heard a story from a clergy member that had been forced to pay hundreds of dollars for each application for a rental, with each application fee including costs for each family member. This means as a family of 5, he's paying more for each application than most. Currently, these application fees are not refunded when the potential tenant doesn't get the rental for which he applied. This application fee structure can quickly deplete money needed for a deposit or paying rent once a unit is obtained and limits a person's ability to apply for other housing when not accepted for a rental unit. This burdensome process of obtaining housing has led the clergy member to consider relocating to another state in order to have an opportunity to obtain a lease and house his family. AB 298 addresses this concern by providing for a refund of application fees when the prospective tenant does not obtain a lease agreement. This bill also limits an application fee to the costs of any background and credit check, which will limit the discretionary nature of these fees that exists today. We hope that this will also limit the application fee to be collected from only the prospective lease signers, rather than every member of the family, including children, like we've heard from that clergy member. Application fees should not be seen as a revenue source for our landlords or property managers. They should merely be a mechanism to cover the direct and actual costs of background checks. AB 298 provides additional tenant protection by requiring appendices to a lease that contains clear and concise explanation of each fee that the tenant may be charged and the tenant's rights per federal and state laws as well as local ordinances. Nevadans for the Common Good encourages you to support this bill, which reduces barriers and adds key protections for tenants who make up nearly 50% of our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 298? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in support?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 298, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. This is Will Bregman, P as in Peter, R-E-G-M-A-N, Communications Director for Battleborn Progress, testifying today in support of AB 298. As others have mentioned, it is imperative that issues of skyrocketing rent and housing instability be addressed this session. Transparency in rental agreements is something that should be absolutely baseline to help reduce burdens on renters, prevent misunderstandings between landlords and their tenants, and provide accountability as well as help people avoid eviction and stay in their homes. We'd like to thank Majority Leader Howdicke for bringing forward this bill, and let's make sure this session we do what we can to level the playing field for tenants and increase transparency in the process. Thank you.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. We will now move to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 298. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to provide testimony in opposition? You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, John Sandy, Johnssande, here today on behalf of the Nevada State Apartment Association. I want to thank the Majority Leader for her work on this bill. I'm new to representing this client, so I was not able to participate in all the discussions, but I know that there was several months of work that have gone behind this. And for a majority of the bill, we actually support, we definitely support the disclosure of fees and not making application fees a revenue source. Definitely supported those provisions in SB 78 as well as here. However, we're just, from a philosophical perspective, unable to get to, and even though it has been scaled back and narrowly tailored to really get at the cause that the Majority Leader is trying to get to at the bill, we still have issue philosophically with rent control. The Apartment Association, while rent control aims to make housing more affordable for low-income renters, it can also have negative effects on the housing markets and the overall economy. Economists from around the world have rejected rent control as effective in increasing the affordability of housing. A quote from Swedish economist Assar Lindbeck, a self-proclaimed socialist, is tremendously visual on the impacts of rent control. And he stated, "Rent control appears to be the most efficient technique presently known to destroy a city, except for bombing." I recognize that my time is limited, so I'll limit my testimony and just recognize the 5 main problems that we believe rent control the problems with rent control. The first is reduced investment in rental properties. Rent control can reduce the profitability of owning rental properties, and as landlords are limited how much they can charge for rent, this can discourage landlords from investing in the new rental properties, reducing overall supply of rental units and exacerbating the shortage of affordable housing. The second is it reduces the quality of rental housing. Rent control can also discourage landlords from maintaining and upgrading their rental properties as they may not be able to recoup the cost through increased rent. This can lead to a decline in the quality of rental rental housing and make it more difficult for tenants to find safe and habitable housing. 3, rent control apartments become scarce. Rent control can create a situation where there is scarcity of rent controlled apartments, which can result in long waiting lists and create a black market for rent controlled units. 4th, it also decreases mobility. Rent control can make it more difficult for renters to move to new locations for work or for other reasons. And 5, market distortion. Rent control can distort the housing market, making it more difficult for supply and demand to balance. It can also create inefficiencies in the allocation of housing resources, as some tenants may be paying below market rents while others are paying higher rents. Overall, while rent control may
Mr.
seem like...
Sandy?
Yes, ma'am.
If you can wrap up your statement,
I will
please.
wrap it up with this last sentence here. Overall, while rent control may seem like a solution to a problem in affordable housing, it can have unintended consequences that ultimately make the problem worse. Other policies, such as what we just discussed, increasing supply, are far more effective, and we appreciate your time and consideration of my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to provide testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 298? Please state and spell your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Yes, Crystal Sherry, Krystal, Sherry, Sherry, President, Nevada State Chapter for National Association of Residential Property Managers. And I am speaking in opposition on our organization's behalf for AB 298. As far as Section 1 is concerned, while we are not opposed to disclosing fees and actually conducting the activity for which the fee was collected, we do want some clarification. We believe that the language, the amended language from SB 78 clearly spells out, which was also Assemblywoman Kasama's concern, as far as the refunding of a prospective applicant's fee if they are declined. SB 78 clearly defined, the amended language clearly defines if that is in the case of a multiple application situation, which this language does not say that. It clearly does not say that. It says if they do not get the unit, they get their money back, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Moving on to the next section, Section 2. The separate appendices, we would, listing out all the fees that would be charged, we would refer back to the amended language from SB 78, because again, in the case of a homeowners association, we talked about this. If there was a violation, if it was the first offense, second offense, third offense was not corrected, those fines could be brought in sweeping. And we are not aware of all times, depending on the violation and how long it occurs, what that ultimate fine or fee would be. So that is kind of a moving target. So we would be able to lean on that amended language, which actually made sense. The appendices that give the explanation of rights on a federal, state, and local ordinances, those are moving targets. And I can tell you, property managers, we work 7 days a week. We would ask and humbly request that the real estate division, yes, ma'am?
Your 2 minutes has ended. Can you please wrap up your statement?
Yes, we would ask that the real estate division provides a state mandated form that would list all of that for the managers to actually use. Thank you.
You may begin when you're ready.
My name is Brenda Lovato, Brenda, last name Lovato, Lovato. I represent the Institute of Real Estate Management and GSC Properties. We have problems with the wordage and verbiage in this. We take applications, but we only take it per unit that is available. We do not take multiple. The only times I've seen multiple situations where applications were taken was when fraud happened. We did have people showing our units online, and people came and they took multiple applications. So I'm wondering if that's where you're getting some of the issues and problems that you've heard. The other thing is that in the section where you're putting rent control in there for seniors, we oppose any rent control. The reason why is we cannot control our cost. Recently, we got hit with a 27% increase from the health district, and everything else has went up too. So unless you can guarantee our costs are not going to continue to go up and up and up, then I have a problem with trying to control rent when we can't control our costs. It also is counterproductive, as the gentleman said that represents the apartment association. It's counterproductive because people don't want to invest into the unit. So thank you for your time.
Hi, Demetria Kalfas Gordon, Hive Real Estate, Demetria Kalfas -Gordon. I want to say ditto to what was said before, and then I want to add, so the question is, if the landlord also happens to be elderly on a fixed income and their costs increase, but they're not allowed to raise rents to cover their costs, and then the landlord is no longer able to maintain that property, who benefits from that? We understand that seniors are on a fixed income, but the landlord's costs are increasing and rent control cannot be put in place for any demographic. This will create more of a slumlord mentality as normal landlords maintain their properties, pay all their bills, etc., as long as they can maintain the cost. Once the rent caps go into effect, but inflation keeps rising, all but slumlords who do not maintain or care about their tenants will be left in the landlord arena. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Lister, Lister. I'm with Nevada Superior Properties. And the portion that I oppose out of 298 is the rent control. It's not needed because we already have rent control. It's called the free market. So those of us that are renting properties in 2021 and then go to 2022 know exactly what that means, because last year was very tough to get our properties rented out. So the free market is doing what it's designed to do, and rents have gone down. Even recently, I lost a tenant that moved out, and we headed at $1,700 before, and now we have to re-rent it at $1,600. Again, the free market is at play. The part I do support is the applications. If anybody knows me in CE classes, continuing education, knows I've been railing against taking 10 applications for one house and keeping the fees. So I do support that part. And the only part that I would like to make sure that we can do is, if we do get multiple applications and we take the first one, then yes, it's fine to give those applications back. But having told that we can only take one at a time, and when we deny that one, have to wait for another one, that would be counterproductive for the owner. Thank you very much.
You may begin when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Kyle Brennan, KYLEBRENNAN, PFM Property Management. I oppose. One issue is obviously the rent control. That is, as my colleagues have said, the market's taken care of itself as of right now. Rent was going up and up and up over last summer and a little bit before that, and as of right now, it's definitely in a decline. So there's nothing I can do to raise the rent over what the market is. That doesn't make sense. So to this section 4 and 5 is not in blue on your deal, which is part of the rent control, which also means that more people would be here. So the last issue, actually 2 other issues. There's a developer up in North Las Vegas. It was at the Culinary Union. He's going to start building, but if this passes, he's not going to build anything. He's pulling out. So that's based off the rent control, and then. There's no transfer tax. Who does this stick to? On number 15, right in section 3, I believe. No transfer tax. Then there should be some sort of a requirement for them to stay 2 years. Otherwise, they just stay there and then move on. So that's all I've got. We're opposed.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 298? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
If you'd like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 298, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hi, my name is Christian Salmon, Christian Salmon. I think the important thing to look at here is throughout the bills we've heard today, we've been talking about how we want to increase housing. As the last caller just mentioned, somebody may be pulling out if there's rent control because their costs are not fixed, but rent control would fix their income. And I have to ask, I know that people from various professions are on the panel. Are you in our shoes? Do you know what it's like to say, you know what, I'm going to allocate some capital to purchase a building, and I'm going to allow others to live in here, and I have risk. It's not just we're Warren Buffett here. We have real expenses, we have real lives, and we are busy all the time trying to get everything done. So when we're talking about rent control, all I can say is, I feel the same way. If it comes too close, if I'm encroached too much, or if it's too uncomfortable, and I see greener pastures elsewhere, outside of state even, I keep my ear out because I don't know where this state's going. And this spooks investors. This is going to prolong what you're trying to do with some of these other bills. You're going to prolong it. I've been in the culinary union. I understand where they're coming from, but this is not the answer. And we have economic policy that's without going down a long road here, it's very dangerous in this country. We have the U.S. dollar on the brink of collapse. When that happens, it's going to really be bad. So that's coming from the top up. That's not coming from Nevada. So unfortunately, we have people that don't know economics that are making economic policy, and that's the cause. It's not all these other things we're talking about for the most part. And I want to be an honest landlord, and I feel we're on the wrong subject
Sir, your 2
here.
minutes is up.
So
Can you please wrap up your testimony?
I just ask you to really think about what it means to own an asset and put it out there. Somebody I just talked to is losing $30,000 because the guy messed up the apartment.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Broadcast, is there anyone else on the line?
Chair, there are no more callers at this time.
We will move on to testimony in the neutral position. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in the neutral position of Assembly Bill 298? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 298? I don't see anyone. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Vice Chair, would you like to give some final remarks?
Thank you, Chair, and I'll keep them brief because I know it's been a long day and a long hearing for all of us, but I would like to remind everyone that we were all on the campaign trail this last year, and I think we've all heard the same remarks. And specifically with the section of rent stabilization, I think this was a great compromise with everyone at the table, where it's not mandating something long term, right? But it's piloting something. There is a sunset date on it if you read through the bill, which will sunset this on December 31st of 2024, giving us the opportunity to see, is this something that works for our state, or is this something that's not? And we're doing it with our most vulnerable population. It's our seniors, 62 years and older, and those who are on disability who don't have the opportunity to make more money. They are on a fixed income. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and again, thank you for bringing this bill forward. I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 298. I will now open up for public comment. Please address your remarks to issues that fall within the jurisdiction of this committee. Please remember that we have heard all the bills today, and public comment, it is not time to rehash those bills. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per person. Please remember to state and spell your name for the record. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give public comment? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give public comment? Ma'am, you may start when you're ready. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Brenda Brenda, last name Lovato, Lovato. My only comment after listening to Culinary trying to help do rent control is they are a union. Why don't they negotiate a better deal? The casinos have made record profits in this state. So that's my public comment is why don't they negotiate a living wage for the people to pay for rent? Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Broadcast, is anyone on the line?
Callers, if you'd like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much, Broadcasting. This concludes our meeting for today. Our next meeting will be Friday, March 31st at 1:30 p.m. This meeting's adjourned.